platform for like monitoring industrial thing, like identifying outliers. Yeah, yeah. But he's a good guy. I don't know the numbers, but they're pretty small. They're like no, I think they said they were going to the second round. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, actually, I look out for the landmark every day now. Well, that's backside. So, kind of like seems to carry old swag. So I used to work in Towels like a video press me like the intersection. Which there's so many crashes. I think that we actually had a weekend was like a live YouTube view of the intersection so that we could, because we kept like hearing crashes and then noticing like, these lights and then being like, wow, that's been more than that. One time, some kid just wrecked this police car.
So you notice how they set this
I
up?
really wish I had video of that. So then we started like actually video of it.
You see that one guy who was up there?
Does this not adjust?
Yeah, see, that's affecting change right there.
Discriminate against all of them.
Nice to see you. Right, although you're sitting here, like, really have to figure out. Yeah, definitely.
Not you guys. Don't blame me.
You're the one holding the picture.
Some things you just get sucked in.
You'll be all right. Let's do it.
All right, I call this meeting back in session. All right, next on the agenda, we have a public hearing. Ordinance rezoning 1206 Carlton Avenue from an R2 family residential to an R3 multifamily residential. First of two readings.
Okay. Mr. Alfley's been handling this application through most of the process, but he wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'll be giving you all an overview. We also have representatives from the applicant who have a presentation for you all as well this evening. This is for 1206 Carlton Avenue. Mr. Justin Shimp, on behalf of Chris Hewlett, who's the owner of the property, has submitted a rezoning petition for 1206. The rezoning petition proposes to change in zoning from the existing R2 residential, two-family residential, to R3 multifamily residential with proper development conditions. And those include affordable housing unit, as well as a restriction in the height to 35 feet. The rezoning application is requested in association with a special use permit. So the first thing that comes forward is the rezoning application. And then depending on how that progresses, a special use permit request would come next. That special use permit request would accommodate 6 units on the site with 7 parking spaces, and that's something that would not be permitted under the current zoning. The subject property is currently vacant with road frontage on Carlton Avenue and an alley access from the rear of the property to Bainbridge Street. In addition, I talked through the SUPs, so we won't go through that again. This application first came to a public hearing on March 13th to the Planning Commission. It was recommended for denial. It came forward, it was then passed forward to council, and in the meantime, the applicant provided proffers. And once that application was received by council, we were informed that you all had referred it back, which is the proper procedure, because additional information had been submitted and it needed to move forward through an additional public hearing. So we scheduled and had a public hearing in July. You all as council were unable to attend that July meeting, and so we're holding a second public hearing this evening in order to hear the application. Some of the concerns, well, not concerns, the appropriateness of a 6-unit apartment building on such a small lot and the adverse impact it could have on the surrounding neighborhood was one of the main focuses of the discussion at the Planning Commission meeting. An apartment with 6 units and only 7 parking spaces seemed inadequate to the commission. They expressed concerns that overflow parking would impact Carlton Avenue and Chestnut Street. The lack of a sidewalk on the north side of Carlton Avenue, the lack of a crosswalk, parking, and speeding were also other concerns that were noted. The commission discussed how the lack of pedestrian features and speeding at this location could impact the safety of children walking to school. The massing of the building was also a concern. Most of the buildings in the area are 1 or 2 stories in height. The proposed apartment would be 3 stories with a maximum height of 35 feet. It should be noted that this is the same maximum height that would be available in the current R2 zoning. So a building of 35 feet could be built on this site today. The commission was concerned the building would not transition well to the southern and western adjacent properties. There was also concern about the status of the alley in that area. 1 unit renting up to 80% AMI was of concern, as they didn't feel that it would have much of an impact on affordability. And it was also noted that this type of development was a needed housing type for the community, but this location may not be the best location. So at the hearing in March, we had citizens in attendance who noted that one was in support of the project, believing it was in line with the social network of the neighborhood. The other speaker read a number of concerns, and those were summarized earlier. And then in July, we also had additional members of the public come and were concerned about the parking and potential overflow of parking into the neighborhood. As I noted before, the commission recommended denial of this application. I also did want to make a few other points that that will be helpful in your deliberation. So if the property remains the R2 property that it is, then there is a potential for a maximum of 2 market rate units on the site. If the property is rezoned from R2 to R3, that would allow for a maximum of 4 market rate units and 1 affordable unit because of the code requirements that would be there. A rezoning from R2 to R3 with the special use permit, which is the application that will be coming forward to you, would allow for a maximum of 5 market rate units and 1 affordable unit. So that just kind of gives the range of the potential for this property, and that is likely pretty helpful in the deliberation. So we have representatives from Shimp Engineering here that can that have a presentation, and I'm also available to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank
So
you.
I have one question.
Sure.
Changing the zoning, going up from, or going to, we're changing it to R1, correct?
It's
R3,
a request
excuse
from R2 to R3.
Going up 1, I meant, not R1. That's only gonna add 1 unit though, correct?
Well, there's,
4.
like I was noting, the ranges there. If it, from what it currently, they can have 2 units
Right.
currently on the site.
Right.
There's the option, if it was just rezoned, to be 5 units.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's rezoned with the special use permit, which would allow for additional density, it could be up to 6 units.
Okay. Okay.
I have some question about the AMI, the period for not more than 10 years. Does that,
That's a condition that, a proffered condition that the applicant has provided to us. And so that is the request they put as part of their application. So they may be able to speak more to the wording behind that.
okay.
They're going to present, and then we'll do the public hearing, and then we'll talk, I guess, as a group.
It's whatever you all choose to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a handout as well. It's easier to look at this.
So thank you for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity to speak with you all tonight. I wanted to start off.
Can you introduce yourself,
Yes, sorry. I'm Kelsey Schlein. I'm a planner with Shimp Engineering.
And I'm Justin Shimp, the engineer and the owner of the company.
And as Missy said, we're here representing the property owner, Chris Hewlett. So I wanted to start off to just address something that was brought up during Community Matters as far as the process and what we have done for community outreach in regards to this project. So a few years ago, the city instated a requirement that applicants for rezoning notify adjacent property owners within a 500-foot radius. So typically, in the city of Charlottesville, that ranges anywhere from 100 to 500 notices that we're sending out to property owners. So that notice was sent out back when this project first went before planning, or when we held a neighborhood, we were required to hold a neighborhood meeting. And so that first neighborhood meeting, I believe, was held back in November of 2017. And so that notice was sent out, and then the city sends out notices prior to their public hearings that to all adjacent property owners. Additionally, we went back to the Belmont Carlton meeting, which are held the second Mondays of every month. And so we made an additional appearance there before this project moved forward to public hearings, since so much time had lapsed between our first meeting and moving forward to Planning Commission. So moving on to 1206 Carlton. So again, the project proposal is for a rezoning from R2, which is 2-family. That allows 2 residential units by right. This could be manifested in a way that is a suite style apartment. So it could be 8 bedrooms on site in 2 units by right. So this rezoning is for a request for 6 units, 2 bedroom, and with proffered conditions for an affordable unit and not to exceed 35 feet in height. Thanks. So again, the requested rezoning and the proffered conditions, but it's really the intent of this project to address some housing needs outlined in the most recent housing needs assessment, like a particular need for small units to accommodate the 2/3 of city households with only 1 or 2 people. So this project kind of achieves some things outlined in the comprehensive plan in regard to housing, as far as the availability of a variety of housing types. And in this neighborhood, a variety of housing types is kind of the platform, the launch pad for a mixed income community, since this area is pretty predominantly single family. It's located in a pretty mixed use corridor, access to commercial work opportunities, as well as restaurants close to Kathy's Shopping Center. Awesome. So again, some existing conditions. It's a vacant site, perfect opportunity for an infill development. And it's also...
A couple of this is a good spot to see the apartments next door to it.
And yeah, in relation to scale. So directly to the right of that yellow arrow at 1206, there is a 6-unit apartment building. And then moving further from that, there's another apartment building on the corner that I'm unsure of how many units, but definitely probably around more than 6. Directly behind, on Bainbridge, it's the second house from the left on the corner. That is another 6-unit apartment building.
What are the building heights of the 2 immediately adjacent?
So the one immediately to the right is a 2-story with a gabled roof. Mm-hmm. So it looks approximately to be 25 to 28. So this just shows the existing multifamily housing in the area, showing that a 6-unit apartment building is pretty consistent with existing housing, especially fronting on Carlton Ave. And I want to take this opportunity to kind of to go through the history of the zoning on the site, just because the historic regulations in this area have shaped the Belmont neighborhood into what it is today. And so just to revisit what historically this site was and how it was recently downzoned in recent years. So this is the site. You can see, that it's the only R2 parcel fronting on Carlton Avenue. It's adjacent to R3 parcels, kind of to just above the site there, R3 parcels, and then just below the site is our commercial parcels. So the only R2 fronting on Carlton. So in 1949, it was zoned as a business parcel. You can see historically there along Carlton Ave, a very mixed-use neighborhood corridor center there. In 1958, it was a little difficult to discern, but either an R3 multiple dwelling, allowing for multifamily residences, or an M1 restricted industrial district.
What was the density? It's interesting that the history of this is it's sort of been steadily downzoned over time, and that the density allowable was per square foot of the units. You can't read it on this, but it was something like 8 units were allowed back
10,
in,
yeah.
10
in
units were allowed
1958,
in
you could
1958.
build 10 units by right on this parcel, because it was determined, number of units was determined per square footage of the parcel. This parcel, the square footage of it, deemed 10 units by right in 1958. 1976, we're looking at an R3 zoning district, so again, multiple dwelling there. 1991, still maintaining the R3 zoning district. And then in 2003 was the only parcel downzoned to R2 fronting on Carlton Avenue. This was particularly interesting because in the 2001 comprehensive plan, it was noted that residents were concerned with discrepancies between the future land use map and the zoning map. And the comprehensive plan listed every single parcel that had an inconsistency between the existing zoning and the land use map. This parcel was not depicted in that list. So it was not an area of concern for residents at the time, according to the list that's included in the 2001 comprehensive plan, which I do have a copy of if any of you would like to look at that. So parking and circulation, we've heard concerns about pedestrian access. So this is 6 parking spaces are required. We're providing 7, and it's a one-way circulation to the site, which will mitigate some potential conflicts with pedestrians because you're not having two-way traffic going out onto Carlton Avenue. So it'll be one point of entry and then exiting from the alley, which will require some improvements to the site.
Yes, I want to take a quick moment on parking, just to highlight something we learned. It's interesting today. We're looking at your proposed parking ordinance for Belmont area, which this is part of, the new area that could be subject to permit parking. And if you read this, what's the code? If it were a duplex, a 2-family, it could be there could be 8 bedrooms there, unrelated people, which is fine. I think this 2-unit housing type is better. But saying it was that, a single family or duplex gets 4 permits, up to 4 street parking permits. As the code is, our multifamily building, because it has adequate off-site, would be entitled to none. So if this were approved to an R3, the residents would not be eligible to park on the streets. So in a way, you're taking congestion off the streets by making it multifamily because all the parking required is on a site. It's interesting coincidence, I suppose, this came up, but it does say that if the neighbors are concerned about that possibly an R3 with more parking on the site is a better fit in the end.
What do you do if somebody has 2 cars in their unit?
I just don't.
Or
You know that coming in. This neighborhood, I've got 1 parking space and I have a bicycle or however else I want to get around.
Yeah, but that's not.
If it's with permanent parking, right, that's assuming that was adopted.
Permanent, right, yeah.
Correct.
Well, and as far as that would be a known thing to renters coming into the area or for the site that I can only have 1 car on site if I live in this area.
But it's likely that they'll just park on the street.
Yes, if they do have more, yes. And so this shows the Bainbridge Leonard Chestnut shows available on-street parking currently as stands.
Yeah, I was over there today.
Yeah, if the permit goes through, then the residents of 1206 would not be able to, all the parking would be provided on site, essentially kind of like.
I owned for a decade a house in Fifield that was an infill development just like this, very similar on 5th Street, and everybody had a second car, and there was only 1 space per each of the 6 units. So it was just like this. There were 6, and everybody had a second car, or a third, and they all parked in the neighborhood. So it will happen. I think we have to.
And how far are you from the Belmont Center?
From the Riverbend.
In Belmont, like say where Moss is, the neighborhood commercial. Yeah, not far, 2 or 3 blocks.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because that's already a very strained parking area.
Well, it would be hard to do permit parking if it was right in,
Right.
These people will. Well, okay, all right. Sorry.
Yeah, yes, and that's the map on the left is, sorry, just up 1. That's currently where the proposed Belmont parking zone is, the site shown within the proposed Belmont parking zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have an image of the future land use map from 2013?
Not included in this presentation. No.
And during
That
the planning.
should be in the staff report.
Right, I just wondered if it was in this because it's an important piece of information to see as well.
Yeah.
And Ms. Creasy, am I correct, during the Planning Commission meeting, they said that the zoning changes that are being recommended for this area would stay the same? Like, is that what I heard from the July 10th meeting?
Zoning
So it
changes.
said it does not conform to current comp plan? standards like this? I just heard
Well,
one of the
we're,
commissioners make
be-
that comment.
Because we don't have a new comprehensive plan at this point in time, the standing plan would be the 2013. So
Yeah.
the land use map that the commission is currently working on is in process. And so comments end up being made back and forth between the two, but the standard of review for this is going to be based on what is approved.
But our proposed changes to the 20, is that something that you can answer? Is that?
I don't
remain
believe they
as-
have any
Okay.
changes to this area
Yeah,
at
they
all.
did say- Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. All right, okay.
All right, so public comment.
Can I make one more statement before you open the public? We look at a lot of these little parcels around, and it's very difficult to find places where you can go to sort of a more affordable type, and let's say market affordable, even if it's not 100% affordable. Because really, the easy money on these is just put a single-family house there. That's the reality of it. And I don't really think that's a good long-term thing for this particular property. I think we have to look for these opportunities to say, hey, here's a spot where we can build a building that's in scale with those around it. We can have adequate parking as defined by the code. I realize people may say that's not enough, but that's what your ordinance requires. We have one more than the ordinance requires. So that would suggest if that's not enough, then what's going on with the rest of the city? So I really think these things need to be weighed. And I know the density is slightly higher in the comprehensive plan, but there's other avenues that we need to think of, other important considerations. And I think this one fits the bill for an infill because we really can have very minimal impact. And if it's plotted in with a parking zone, then you can require to have people not park on the street. And I think you have to at some point create housing that doesn't have that idea of having 2 or 3 cars, or you're not going to get people away from it. I know in my own experience with my office, when I moved off the downtown mall, I had a parking lot, people started driving to it. They could walk, but you enable this kind of activity and it happens. So I think you have to look for places where people can move to and say, hey, I accept the fact that I have 1 parking space, this is fine. This is convenient enough to walk to or bike to whatever other services I need on a daily basis. So we think that's the best reason for this, and we appreciate your time. We're happy to answer more questions too after the public speaks.
There was another concern about the alleyway and whether you all would repair the entire, or have you all taken a look at that since the July 10th? Have you talked to the neighbors and have you made a decision about?
We haven't spoken with the neighbors, but it's a alley gives us the right to maintain it, to improve it, fully. So I expect all the potholes and things like that would have to be fixed just from our own purposes. I don't know that it's necessarily a city requirement. On a site plan, the city traffic engineer may say, hey, you have to have paved access to your site. That is a city code.
Yeah, I know, but during that discussion, you talked about paving a portion of it, and then there was some discussion about you paving the entire, and you all, I thought there was just some question about, and that you all were going to think about that, and I'm just asking you what.
We have the right to pave it all. I think we probably would pave it all, but that's something we sort of had put off to a site plan stage.
It's an alley that's in disrepair. I mean, I don't consider it one that I would want to be traversing across with my vehicle on a daily basis based on what I saw today.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there's a practical element of we're going to rent these units. We need to have, especially you have to leave that bay, right? So
Yeah.
we need to make that functional. So I don't think that's really a question as if we would do it.
And the AMI, could you talk about that a little bit? A period of not more than 10 years? So is your intention 10 years?
The intention is 10 years. And I think we got that. This doesn't trip the level for affordable housing. We're way under the FAR in the zoning ordinance. But we think that the 15% affordable is a good goal to the extent that when you do a new development, we can provide on-site. I've done that in a couple projects in Albemarle. We've actually built on-site affordable that's just developer funded. And so I think that's an opportunity here. I'd say it does not trip that requirement, but if you can fit it into your budget to have an affordable unit, meet that 15% goal, I think it's a worthy endeavor.
And do you have a clear, during that discussion, there was some question about what the rent would be for your property?
We have that number, actually.
Okay.
Came from the new housing study.
Yes, so this is the HUD rents, and this is
What's the
the 2-bedroom.
So 2-bedroom, 80% AMI, including utilities. it's still remarkably high. It's 1460 is the 80% MI. And it's an interesting, just a quick side note, I actually have a little housing complex in Nelson my wife and I run, where we rent to people for like $750 is our max for a 2-bedroom. We can do it out there because it's a different cost of doing business somewhat. And unfortunately, you really can't build new construction and rent for less than that here. It's unquestionably a massive problem. And I think in a project like this, all we can do is chip at that level just above that, and I hope that opens up housing, at that level below. And that's sort of that's the solution from a small lot like this we can come up with. But yeah, I mean, it's unquestionably a problem, and we're glad to hear City Council is taking such an interest in it.
So would you consider a 50 or 60% AMI?
What's a 60? I mean, we can look at that. I have to tell you, I don't actually own this property, so I can't change that proffer on the fly. But yeah, I mean, I think I can't commit at this moment. If you said that was the only way this could be approved, I can certainly go back to our owner and say, hey, this is the consideration, and we'll talk about it. I think there's a value in just having 6 2-bedroom units that are at that level, just 80 to 100% in market rent, because it's going to open up some housing to that level below. But we're open to other things if that's desire of council.
I have a question there. Is there an SUP allowed with an R2?
SUP? There's an infill SUP available, and this
For
is
R2?
For R2.
What would that be?
It's an increase of 1.5 on the density, plus up to a bonus of 2 for meeting a certain requirement on the LID checklist. So R2 is, if I get this math right, I want to say 12 units an acre, roughly. And so 1.5 would get you to 16 units an acre. So perhaps times a quarter of an acre, maybe 4.
So
It'd be
4
close.
units. And as I understand it, in our current zoning, when the SUP is clearly articulated in that zoning, so the public can see that with any particular use type, they know that there'd be an SUP associated with it. So it wouldn't be like anybody's springing anything on the public. There's something that's already there. It's already in the zoning. An SUP is already a possibility in the zoning. It still needs review, but it's a document, correct? So
Yes.
I'm just curious, why didn't you go that route?
I think that the sort of marginal increase of going to like 2 8 or 4 bedrooms to maybe, 4 bedrooms, actually more bedrooms than we have here. But sort of that increase probably made it better off just to make it a single family house, just from the dollars and cents standpoint. And I also think we looked at the zoning map and said, why is this thing R2 if everything up and down the street is B3, B2, R3 already? So it seemed to us like if the building scale was not wildly out of proportion in height, right, 35-foot height, compared to what was allowed on our adjoining properties, which are actually, so they could be redeveloped at 45-foot building heights on both sides of us. So we were trying to keep it in that scale of an R2, but with a density to give us 2-bedroom units with an R3.
And I hear that, but again, the standards of review say that we have to go towards our comprehensive plan, and the standing comp plan is 2013. And that puts this area in a low-density area that's an R1, R2 blend. And so if you're asking for rezoning now that doesn't match our comp plan vision, this is kind of just coming out of the blue that it's an R3. It's not even associated with what's allowed by an SUP under R2. I just want to get that clear. So, and you decided not to do the R2 SUP because you couldn't make it pencil out.
Yeah, I think that,
Okay.
could we have done the same? I didn't consider that idea of doing the same number of bedrooms. Right? I could do 3 4-bedroom units maybe, right? I don't know if that would be perceived as better by anybody. To me, it's the same. And it's cleaner to do it as an R3 with, like, in our little complex, we have like a lot of single moms, and we have people who just, like, 2 bedrooms is great for them. So I was just thinking about my experience with that. I said, well, 2 bedrooms make sense here, and the building's not so large, and that in some ways, I look at the comprehensive plan, I look at the ordinance and how it sort of became allowing less and less density over time. And I think that's at least a little bit of our issue today is attributable to that. And so I look at that and say, well, maybe this was in 2003, we thought like zone it down, this is a good idea, but maybe if we fast forward to 2018, we think that a higher number of units is a better idea, this location.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak? I don't have a list. Do I have it?
Ms. Katz.
Yeah, I only have.
Put lights on.
Oh,
Ms. Katz was the only one who signed up for this one.
okay. You said Karen?
Katz.
Karen Getz, okay.
That's the position.
Yes, fire on. Cramps. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Frederick Schmidt. I live at 312 Chestnut Street. And the petition I handed to you is signed by 17 residents, mostly on Chestnut Street, and a couple are close by. And I have two statements that were formed by committees, so I'll try to read them quickly. First is the comprehensive plan calls for no greater than 15 units per acre. This request calls for the equivalent of 24 units per acre, approximately 24 units. This is more than 50% above the limits called for in the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission exercised due diligence in the two previous meetings and voted both times to deny the request to rezone. The effect of the proposed plan, because of inadequate parking, would be to have spillover parking that would affect not only Chestnut Street, but much of the neighborhood. Many homes do not have off-street parking, so others park up the street from the proposed development would affect those residents, and there would be a ripple effect on others. Finally, there is a major traffic issue from Main Bridge Street down to the corner of Carlton and Carlton, where cars are parked in the street, and basically there is a one-way street which you must take turns to get through, particularly with delivery trucks parked there. I'd also, the other statement, we ask you to vote against the rezoning for three reasons. The first, the rezoning will provide more unaffordable housing. There are already two approved or by right developments planned within a 3-block radius, which will almost certainly be unaffordable. Only one of the units in the proposed plan is identified as affordable. That is for not more than 10 years, making it unlikely it will be affordable for even a year, given the current rental market. The proposed development would not provide sufficient parking, where we support a city that is pedestrian-friendly and transitions from cars to walking and biking. There are significant safety concerns in this area of Belmont.
You can finish your thought.
Okay, I'm hearing things.
Yeah, you can finish your thought. No,
Okay.
it is time.
This is a street with no sidewalks on one side in a 3-block area with no sidewalks at all and Chestnut, Myrtle, Spring, Cherry. We encourage you to review with staff what the parking and pedestrian safety plans are regarding the other two developments, one across from Carlton Avenue and one on Holly Street off of Monticello Road. Finally, the rezoning does not follow the city's comprehensive plan. When my family moved to Belmont 31 years ago, we moved there because it was the only neighborhood that we could find to be affordable. We've loved raising our family in a diverse neighborhood with older neighbors, young families, homeowners, renters of all different backgrounds and incomes. While I know it's tempting to look at this rezoning as a single decision, I urge you to look at how it relates to the other developments currently planned in this area of Belmont and what its impact will be on the affordability of housing in Charlottesville, the safety of the families that live here, and the ability of other families of all incomes to move here. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Katz, she left. She left, yeah. Is there anyone else?
Can I still do this?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey guys, my name is Rory Stolzenberg. I live on Water Street between 1st and 2nd. I'm coming up to speak emphatically in favor of this development and to say that this sort of project in a relatively wealthy neighborhood, relatively white neighborhood, where we're talking about having 2 units or 6 units with one affordable is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about neighborhoods across the city sharing the burden of density. We should have it everywhere. We're talking about a plot that's a 12-minute walk from where we are right now, a 4-minute walk from the center of the Belmont Neighborhood Commercial Corridor. I submit that the impacts on affordability of having more units, whether they're designated affordable or not, relative to having a single-family home or 2 units, can only be in favor of affordability. Adding supply to the market is how you reduce prices. I know you haven't had time to read that Glazer article yet, but I hope that you do. And I think you'll find that this is exactly the sort of project we should not only have now, but really need all over the city. And I hope that in our comprehensive plan to come, we can fix the failures of this one and allow for more housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, closing public hearing. Any comments, discussion?
Do you want to do a motion before we get to comment?
I don't think we have to do a motion
We don't
because
have
it's
to do
just
it.
a first
This
reading.
is just pure, right, oh, so we're not doing
So
that
we
at
just-
all anymore, right, okay.
The only
But
thing,
it moves forward if there's significant, I mean, how do we signal that there
right, the only thing
is
I
enough
would
support?
advise you all is if you're comfortable with this going on the consent agenda for your next meeting, that's fine. But if any 1 or 2 of you feel like this should be pulled from the consent agenda, it probably would just be best for the public for agenda purposes at the next meeting to indicate that now.
I'm not comfortable with it going on the consent agenda because I think I'd look at this in tandem with the SUP request, which has a lot more information and addresses, I think it's where a lot of my concerns lie.
So do we just have open discussion then without a motion?
Right, if the council feels like it doesn't want this on the consent agenda next time, we'll just note that and have it as a separate action item.
One of the things I'm also interested to hear about is the AMI. Mayor Walker asked you about would you be willing to go down to 50 or 60%, and you stated, hey, I don't own the property, you have to talk to your partners. I would be very interested in hearing what how they feel in regards to going to that AMI level. Well, I thought you have to talk to them. I mean, sure.
We're just having a discussion now.
We're just having a discussion with ourselves, right?
All right. Well, maybe we can talk offline in regards to it, but I'll wait your answer.
So may I say
Yeah.
something? I think that we have many goals that we have to meet. There is there is an affordable housing crisis. And we also heard tonight, with great passion, the importance of community engagement. That is what the whole point of the comprehensive plan update is to get the public involved in these discussions where we learn together about the severity of the crisis of housing, but also the importance of the character of neighborhoods that people grow up in, live in, raise their children in. That's physical character. So I'm looking at this situation as seeing it's a breakdown of a transparent, accountable process. The zoning ordinance is something that the public has grown to understand is a document that has direct bearing on what happens on their property. The comprehensive plan is a document that is supposed to tell the community and everyone else, including developers, what the future vision is of the community's development. In this case, the vision is the land use plan. It is not being met by this project. And secondarily, by not doing the SUP with an R2 that would have increased the density in a missing middle format, the public has been denied knowing what the rezoning was going to be. Out of the blue, it's R3. If there was an R2 with an SUP, at least it's in the zoning document that that's a possibility. Right now, the public is not privy to what's going on in their neighborhoods because a property owner is coming forward with their own individual plan, their own individual vision of how we can meet the affordable housing crisis. This is a community process that we must undertake. And it also just flies in the face of our other goal for community engagement, transparency, and accountability. I find it really, once again, after being here for 7 years, trying to change the zoning, trying to get it to be comportment in alignment with the comp plan, our zoning is out of sync with our vision, and then our vision seems to be out of sync with our zoning. And we can't do this anymore. We've got to get moving on the comp plan update. We've got to make sure we have these community conversations, and then we've got to get the zoning to match that vision. Right now, this is a shell game, I believe. No one knows what to expect except when they come to a public hearing and come before the dais.
Well, just a thought, which is I would urge everybody who is following and on TV, I hope, the affordable housing debate and the policy discussion that the city has been in for a while now and is going to go into for a lot longer to come, to follow this very closely, because these trade-offs and these tensions are exactly what the city is squarely in the mix of. And I thought that Mr. Stolzenberg referred, there's a new member of the Planning Commission as of tonight, referred to it, or whenever you get sworn in or whatever, but referred to it pretty well, because we've had some big battles even in the last couple of years. Density, there's debates about it, but at least what our own housing study said is we need more supply because we're in demand across all strata of housing, of housing income. So we need more of it, because what's happening right now is the wealthier people are snapping up the middle income, and the middle income people are snapping up the lower income, and because the city's in demand, and that has made housing more scarce, and it's made it more expensive because the city's in demand, and that hurts everybody. So if density near you feels like gentrification, or feels like whatever word you're going to put on it, it's also, if you're saying no to it all, it's contributing. Having less supply is contributing to increasing prices, which is what our own housing study said. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do it sensitively. We don't have it incorporated in the comprehensive plan. The problem I see is that when you're delaying things always behind a 10-year comprehensive plan process, or what we've talked about with the zoning study, it's very hard to get projects underway because it takes a long time. I mean, probably a couple of years have gone into this project. So if it's scrapped entirely, then I'm not saying I'm in love with the project, and I did live in a development that was almost identical to this, and it was really tough because I would think that if we move this ahead, one of the things that it would constrain would be putting permit parking in the immediate blocks around this, because you're going to have 6 to 10 cars probably parking on the street, because that's exactly what happens at these other infill developments. Whether you want people to have bikes or not, a number of them will have cars. And so I think we have to think about that, but I also think we do have to put our money where our mouth is in terms of following our housing study and expeditiously increasing supply in the city, because otherwise it just will get more and more expensive. But I totally ally myself with everything that Councilor Galvin has said also. I just think that these are the tough calls that we're going to be faced with again and again and again if we want to increase supply in a time when the city is increasingly in demand.
There's also going, if I may add, the Riverbend development is going to be adding about 130 units within this area. This Belmont Center, I've asked last meeting that we actually do a more rigorous parking study because of the crunch in the parking, because of all the commercial investment in that area. This is a tragic condition where this was not planned. This was an area that was rezoned neighborhood commercial corridor, which put a lot of pressure into an area that didn't have the infrastructure to sustain it. And now everyone's shoehorning more units into this area and it really is not been given any kind of forecasting as to what needs there are. There's not even sidewalks. So I think this is a reflection of our failure to do long-range visioning and planning. And I think we need to start doing that rapidly as well.
But so do you mind if I respond?
No, but I just want to say
Yeah.
that there's 12 small area plans in the city. If you think about this, like 100 acres of asphalt sitting there, and each one of those, you've got 1,200 acres of asphalt.
But so the reason I want the public to follow this really carefully is you get also into the distinction between stuff the city does with its own dollars, which is floated out there as this great utopian idea for us to solve affordable housing. So the city builds or the city directs somehow, or the city works with developers who build housing to fill in the housing needs. And it's much harder for the city to direct. Like we had 4 or 5 years ago was when we started moving on the Cherry Avenue small area plan in the Fifeville Neighborhood Association. I remember having debates 3 years ago about the zoning overhaul. Like it takes a long time in a city of 50,000 people to get a lot of these more ambitious things done, whereas, most of the percentage of actual housing is going to be built by developers who have capital and who have plans and have architects. And our job is to work with the Planning Commission to make them as good as we can, but it takes a long time to get these done. So we're constantly stuck with the crisis worsening because there's no supply coming online and the demand is increasing and housing gets more expensive, which is what we just heard about the base rate of the housing units here at $1,500, whatever it is, for 2 bedrooms.
I think Councilor Galvin makes a incredibly good point in regards to following our plan. And I mean, hearing you explain it the way in which you would, I don't know if I could support currently, because I think you're absolutely right. And due to our lack of long-range planning, we just find ourselves trying to just put anything in because we think it's a short-term fix, but we're not thinking about the long-term. I think your argument is extremely compelling.
And she mentioned it, but I couldn't help but look around us. So what is all the buy right that can happen there? And there's a lot that still can happen, as you mentioned, like the Riverbend project, buy right. And I can't have that not be in my brain as we think about when this all is finally done. Are we just adding more fuel to that fire? And I went over there today personally, and I just really struggle with that flow of even just the traffic within this property, and especially with the parking constraints that we know we're already hearing. And what this is actually going to add to it, and I struggle with that.
So I'm just curious of when do we decide to plan long term? Because what they're proposing is something that we say is needed. Now, there's nothing affordable about it at the rates that they propose or at the 80%. So that's concerning, but that's where we are across the city as a whole. But if there are still people who can afford those rents, that's what I struggled with the Kmart Shopping Center is when do we decide? And I'm still hearing different things based on different developments when we are changing our strategy. Like, why weren't we having this conversation when Riverbend was coming?
If I may. Well, Riverbend is a by right development. And why none of us were here when they changed the zoning to neighborhood corridor commercial. That was in 2003. So that is an existing zoning that now is about 3 comprehensive plan updates too old. We haven't changed our zoning since 2003, even though we've had 3 comprehensive plan updates since then. So right now we're in the middle of trying to get our comp plan updated, and it's churning,
Yes.
and so that's the citywide process. But every year we have a capital budget, and every year we can put money into the small area plans. And the small area plan that Councilor Signer was talking about is Cherry Avenue. Well, we haven't put enough investment in that. It's been contracted out to Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission to supplement staff. It has been just limping along for about 2 years. And it doesn't have the resources it needs to get it done quickly. They want to get their zoning changed, just like we're trying to do now with the strategic investment area, just like we now need to do with the hydraulic small area plan. So we have a question of needing to also put more resources into that arm of our government in order to turn those vision plans into actionable items. And the first step to do that is to get the community around a vision. The second step is to get the zoning that's going to implement that vision. And we're constantly undermining the community's vision by allowing these rezonings on a piecemeal basis, based on what an individual property owner wants to do.
I think she's right. And I mean, Mayor Walker, to your point in regards to when do we start the long-term planning, I feel like we're doing that now. Like these conversations are conversations that honestly haven't been being had for a long time. And the fact that even we're talking about housing studies, or we've had an actual work session about housing plans, looking at studies, devising a long-term plan, like that's the kind of stuff that.
No,
that
I
we're
know,
doing.
but I mean, you sit here and you have communities constantly telling us that they have enough units in their neighborhoods. So
Right.
where at some point, there's going to have to be a discussion with the community about if we are going to grow, and we are trying to do that in a more equitable way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this project is it, but I'm just overall, then what does it look like? And I mean, I'm thinking now about when Habitat, the last presentation they gave us, where they were trying to fit into the space, right? And fitting into that space was better for someone to have a home than to not, right?
not,
So
right.
I'm just, and I know it's a different space in a different part of town, but what you're talking about with the Cherry Avenue small area plan, this particular individual, they own land in this part of town.
Sure,
So.
and I think, if I may, you look at this project, and there's references to the surrounding apartment buildings nearby, but there's also smaller family, single-family detached homes nearby. And so when I look at the R2 with an SUP could have given them 4 units, why not move forward with 4 small lots? Small cottage lots that would have been in keeping with the physical character of the neighborhood, and also in keeping with our existing zoning to at least a predictable way. I think that's the predictability, the ability for the community to see what could possibly happen, is really an important principle, I think, in any, I mean, again, it's related to trust and credibility of our government, and zoning is an ordinance. So if that ordinance can always be undermined by an individual property owner, then the public has no trust in that ordinance and has no trust in that comprehensive plan process. So, yeah, as we continue on with these conversations about updating the comprehensive plan, we've got to begin talking about, okay, so what does that low density mean in terms of residential? Maybe it does mean that we move forward with allowing to have a more mix of quadruplexes and triplexes and small apartment buildings in there, but it's more clear to the public that that's what's going on. And then that land use vision plan that the Planning Commission has been struggling with since December, it shows the areas that are going to have high intensity, middle intensity, lower intensity in a much more refined way. And that's what we got to get to, so that the public can see and trust.
I agree. This is a broader discussion, but I would hope, do we feel like we are at a point where this is like the first reading, that we can move on? Or we're just looking at the time and the public's here
Yeah,
for a
sure.
lot of other items?
And we'll have it listed as a separate action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
It's a
All right.
change to get this in my head, how we do this now.
So next, we're having a public hearing for zoning text amendments requiring temporary use of permits for temporary surface parking facilities and temporary construction yard. First of 2 readings.
Me again. So this is for 2 separate code changes, but we've been able to integrate them all into one ordinance. So I'll give you the highlights of both sections. And we've received some public comment today for some folks that won't be able to be here, so I'll provide that background as well. So over the last number of years, the city has received increased requests to utilize city right-of-ways and private property in order to facilitate development. It's simply not possible to complete certain projects while remaining completely on the site. Current zoning regulations provide no means to permit or regulate these requests at this time. Proposed amendments to the temporary use permit allowances will provide staff with a means to regulate and enforce private property requests in a manner that best serves the community while reducing the need for use of right-of-ways. Temporary construction yards would provide space for material and equipment storage as well as contractor offices. And so the regulations that are coming forward for that have a number of criteria associated with them, including making sure that it's attached to an active project, that they have a number of diagrams that are included as part of their application, that it complies with all guidelines, and including those with erosion and sediment control. Screening, that's a really big one. We'll talk about that a little bit further. If there is lighting, for that to be dark skies compliant, to be maintained in a orderly fashion, and to assure that that temporary construction yard goes away when it's no longer needed for construction. And fully restored back to its state at the end of that process. The other one that's also associated with it is a temporary surface parking lot. While construction yards can address the construction needs, there's often a conflict with neighboring properties and contractor tradesmen parking. Large projects often have dozens of vehicles that are associated with them, and several neighborhoods have been heavily impacted when vehicles associated with construction occupy all the street spaces, which limits access to residents. Current zoning regulations provide no means to permit or regulate requests to use or create off-street parking areas to accommodate these vehicles. Proposed amendments to the temporary use allowances will provide a means to regulate and enforce this while reducing the need for contractors to potentially park on roadways and in other places. Those regulations also would be tied to an active construction project, have diagrams that would note the access, ingress, and egress for these temporary parking lots. Comply with regulations, of course, be compliant with ADA, screening, if it's lit, also be dark skies compliant, and maintain in a clean and orderly fashion, and have requirements for restoring the area back to what it was prior to it being used as a surface parking lot. We received comment today concerning the code. One being that we had one code reference that was a number off, and so we can make that specific correction. In 34-1196C5, it references section 34-981, and it should reference 34-982. So we will make sure to make that correction. The other comment that was provided was concerning the screening. So we had a member of the public that was felt like that the text should be a bit different to, and this is in section 34-1195C2, to allow for more flexibility concerning placing a fence. So this section of the code, screening of these things is crucial. And that's something that has come up quite often. We currently, in the ordinance that's before you, have denoted an S3 buffering, which an S3 buffer is an extensive landscape buffer or a fence. The current code allows you to do one or the other. We anticipate that in most cases they will want to use a fence. We also were looking into the future a bit because there's potential, well, at least on our professional end of things, that an S3 buffer may change and it may just be landscaping and it may not include a fence. So we added language in here that clarified that a fence or an opaque wall are available for the screening in those situations. And so the comment was, the language in here notes that with the, you can do an S3. So if somebody decides that they're going to have a construction yard or a lot, they can either choose to do the landscaping S3 or they can choose to do a wall, or a wall or fence. That will be their choice. There's also additional language that we have in here that notes that with approval that you can have a wall or fence, and we put that in there anticipating that perhaps S3 buffer in the future may not include a wall, and it would be very important for that to be a feature for temporary construction yards. I know that was clear as mud, I'm sorry. I think we can get to kind of the same, we can get to the comment that was made noted that they didn't want the opportunity for it to have a specific approval. And the language may be a bit complicated because right now you can choose the landscaping or you can choose the wall, but in the future that might be different. So we are, that's probably the only thing, and that came up at 5 o'clock today, so trying to sort that out this afternoon. But I think it could go either way and be effective. The main point is making sure that there is a screening of these things because they'll be near people, and that there be a choice for that screening, and that a fence or a wall be one of those choices. And that is all I have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'll open public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak about the matter? No? All right, close public hearing. Discussion.
Mayor Walker, I'm willing to put this on the consent agenda for next meeting.
I will second that request.
Mr. Blair, do you have any? Okay. All right.
See, we're getting the hang of it.
All right, thank you. Next, we have public hearing resolution, special use permit for 140 Emmett Street North, Gallery Court Hotel. Good evening.
All right, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So tonight, before you is a special use permit for the additional height of up to 80 feet at property located at 140 Emmett Street North. Mr. V. Patel, who's the owner, is wishing to redevelop the property with a boutique hotel to replace the existing hotel that was lost to a fire this previous May. And so the hotel use is by right, but the height is what they're requesting for the special use permit. And the by right height is 60, and again, they're requesting for an additional 20 feet. This property also falls within one of the city's entrance corridors, so in addition to the Planning Commission's recommendation for the special use permit, there's also an entrance corridor review board recommendation. The ERB is to make a recommendation as to whether the proposed use will have an adverse impact on the district. As part of the recommendation, they can include conditions that would mitigate the impacts. The ERB met September 11th, and they discussed this issue. They did vote that, or they moved to state that this project would have an adverse impact to the Route 29 entrance corridor because of the increased height. And they stated that there should be at least a minimum of 6-foot planting bed and then a 7-foot sidewalk. So then, as part of their Planning Commission discussion, they added additional conditions to what staff had already proposed, and some of those were included to help mitigate what they stated as issues for the entrance corridor. So some of the conditions include a requirement for a 7-foot sidewalk, the requirement for a 6-foot planting bed, and then they had a condition in there that stated any future design that comes back before the entrance corridor review board would need to indicate features that would reduce the apparent height of the southwest corner of the building, and that corner of that building faces the Ivy and Emmett intersection. So Planning Commission, before they moved to make a recommendation, discussed a number of issues regarding this project, one of which was the relation to the comprehensive plan's land use designation. They discussed quite a bit the pedestrian environment and how the proposed pedestrian improvements, including the street cafe, would affect the pedestrian positively. They discussed how the subject property's ideal location would encourage guests to walk to various amenities nearby. They also discussed the proposed pedestrian improvements and how they relate to the future Emmett Streetscape project. They discussed the massing and scale. Some of the commissioners agreed that the scale fit the context of the area, noting that the existing topography provided relief from where the building was at its highest, while others noted there was a concern over the building mass on Emmett Street and its effect on the pedestrian. They discussed a number of other issues, some of which include the trash delivery location and traffic flow. Again, they've added some conditions as part of the proposed resolution before you tonight to help mitigate those impacts, and that's in one of the attachments to your memo tonight. So Planning Commission did recommend approval with a vote of 5-2, and again, they included some conditions to mitigate some of the impacts they discussed. They also held a public hearing September 11th, where a number of neighbors came out and expressed concern about the additional height, as well as concern for the future buildings that would locate across the street as part of the EVA's Ivy Corridor plan. There were also some citizens who expressed support of the project, stating benefits as local business owner and ideal location. The only other thing I wanted to make you aware of was we did send you guys a memo from city staff from the Emmett Streetscape project team requesting you consider an additional condition that would just make sure any streetscape improvements that the developer provided would not move the curb line that's existing, just so nothing would negatively impact the city's future Emmett Streetscape project. So I have that language here if you need help with that, but we sent you that memo, I think, Friday. And then the applicant is here to give a brief presentation, and then myself and Tim Mach, who's the project manager for the Emmett Streetscape project, as well as our GIS analyst, Bob, is here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, I think you can just come up. Thank you.
So are you ready for the applicant presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it here?
Good evening to all. To begin, I extend my sincere gratitude to my team, my former staff of the XL Inn & Suites, the guests, and most importantly, my family, friends who believe in me. I will back up a little bit. My name is Vipul Patel, and I am the owner of the property, existing property, and the developer. Respected citizens in the audience, city council members and staff, Heather Newmeyer and the city staff, thank you. On a mere chance opportunity in 1981, my parents met the owners of the University Lodge Motel, which led to my family acquiring the establishment. After 36 years of proud ownership, our beloved XL Inn & Suites was shattered in mere hours on May 4th, 2017. With outpouring support, we remain true to not give in nor give up. Thus, my team and I are here before you representing the Gallery Court Hotel. I want to take a moment to introduce my team. I've got Asim Kumar with NBJ Architecture, Daniel Heyer, Civil Engineers at Line and Grade. With Water Street Studios, we have Jake Fox and Eugene Yang. He's in here? Yep, he is. The Gallery Court Hotel represents absolute unique opportunity for many, including my family, the city, the university, and the community. A family-owned boutique hotel that will forever retain its glory and for being at the most dynamic location in the city, and the one to lend to the Emmett Streetscape project. Additionally, our support to nonprofit organizations speaks for itself, and for which, with the new project, shall further solidify the goodwill to many more, including SPICMA K UVA, Indian Association of Charlottesville, and the American Red Cross. Today's travelers seek out local relevance when choosing hotels, and we hope soon Charlottesville's annual 3.3 million overnight guests can benefit by having a brand new upscale option that pays tribute to Charlottesville's celebrated culture and history when they visit our city and the university. With the purposeful intent, the new hotel is aptly named in respect to the 1951 established, the Gallery Court Motor Hotel. To date, we have candidly communicated our project before the city staff, the Planning Commission, and our neighbors, which includes the university, CNO Railroad, and the residents of Lewis, Mountain, and Venable. I'm thankful to have this opportunity to engage directly with you, the counselors. I value your time, your energy, and your integrity, to which I'm certain you have, through your due diligence, reviewed the resolution before you. To that, my task too is not easy or simple, and it shouldn't be. Much lies ahead shall we be fortunate to gain your approval. One of the components to the SUP process is community engagement and their opportunity to speak before the respective bodies. On September 11th hearing, the September 11th hearing generated views of opposition and support. Opposition is appreciated, but to guise it under any other intentions or motives at the expense of the process is disheartening. I too bleed blue and orange, but I also bleed black and gold for the city founded in 1762. Planning Commissioner member Tanya Dowell passionately and accurately stated, her quote, "We aren't looking at this from a city perspective. We're looking at it at a prestigious university perspective when this is a city property," end quote. I respect Commissioner Dowell for standing up for the city property, which in itself is an island by itself, or sitting on or is an island or sitting on an island. Respectfully and with confidence, my team and I are here before you to gain approval of the resolution as recommended by the Planning Commission on September 11th. Thank you and God bless. I'll turn it over to the next member.
This is Asim from NVJ Architecture, and we are the architect on the project. When Vipul approached us for this hotel project, which has some parking and rooms on the top of it, his main concern was like how to scale the building down to the pedestrian level, and also how to make it a beautiful building in the Charlottesville area. If you see, the project was like some 2 levels of parking and then some rooms on the top of it. So what we did, we tried to scale it down by breaking the mass in the front with some cafe, like 2-level height there, and some seating on the top of it. So you see people's activity going on there. On the side elevation also, if you see, there are some seating provided, like kind of lounge provided on the top of the building so that the guests feel like to interact with the surrounding in the evening. So those are the elements. And if you see, the building has been done in its very articulated fashion to break the building in 3 parts, like base and the column feature there. So with that, I'm giving it to our landscape architect.
Thanks. So one of the requests made by a member of the public was to look at do an expanded study of the building in relation to its context. And so you can see in the top 2 sections there, we've kind of cut a section following the red and the blue lines that really show the vertical relationship between what's proposed and what's existing. Some of the buildings around it they're a mix. They're mostly UVA buildings. There's a few parking garages, existing Cavalier Inn, a small restaurant, and student housing. Up the hill, it's like was mentioned before, we're on a low point, so up the hill is Cars Hill, kind of going to the right, and then to the back, to the rear of the image would be going up Lewis Mountain. So we're at a regional low point, and roughly where the top of the hotel sits is pretty close to the height of where that top of that stair tower going up Cars Hill towards Colbeth Theater. Go to the next. I think another member of the public asked us to look at what UVA had produced for the Ivy Corridor. We don't know what's going to go on across the street. We've seen some conceptual massing and program studies, so we've done our best to just at least show what was shown during those meetings. And it does seem like, from what's been provided publicly, that the neighborhood will be going more vertical in the near future. So I think that's in keeping with what is being proposed with the hotel. Jumping down to the street level, you can kind of see what the pedestrian experience would be like. We've had good feedback from Planning Commission, and so what you're seeing here is kind of what was done before that feedback. What was asked of us was to make the buffer bigger, so you're seeing a 4-foot buffer, and what was asked is to do a 6-foot buffer, so that would get even deeper. We'll have a wide sidewalk where you can comfortably walk side by side or past somebody. We'll have large shade trees that will make that a comfortable walking environment. And then really the heart is a little patio and cafe that activate that street level, which helps the urban nature of that site and gives you something to see and do for the neighborhood and for the students around there and travelers. And of course, safety is one of our other top concerns. So where pedestrians interact with cars, we're going to have an audio warning system that will give you an alert that you're entering a pedestrian environment.
So as we navigated the community process, we tried to put metrics and data behind some of the things that were concerning. One of them was traffic and a fear that this hotel would generate and contribute to traffic congestion on the corridor. In all reality, even though the hotel is doubling its rooms or almost doubling its rooms, the increase in traffic is about 1%, given the context of how much traffic is in that corridor in the day. So it's hardly measurable as an increase to the traffic congestion. I will say, though, that these numbers don't account for the Villa Diner being gone and the Cavalier Inn being gone. So in reality, there's likely to be a reduction in traffic congestion as a result of those traffic generating establishments not being there. So we also heard some feedback about stormwater and some concerns about stormwater. Obviously, the area is prone to flooding. UVA is working to mitigate that with the project on their side of the road with a stormwater facility. Our project will do its part to reduce pollutant loads on site. We will have a BMP on site per Planning Commission's feedback. So, yeah, in conclusion, we feel like we've done a lot of listening to the neighborhoods. We've tried our best to respond specifically to that feedback and incorporate it in a nuanced and particular way. And at this point, we're happy to hear feedback and questions.
Okay. So we're going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone? Oh, I think I have a list. Hold on. Yes. So Jessica Otey.
I'm here.
Okay.
Good evening. Okay. My name's Jessica Otey. I live in Alderman Road. It's part of the Lewis Mountain neighborhood. I signed a petition. I'm against this granting of the special use permit. But I want to say, I know I live close to UVA. I moved there knowing that. I accept there's good things and bad things. I've been through it with the athletic department a couple times. But I get it that it's an area that's going to change. This is the moment in this town, and this university is growing, and they're doing things, and they have that whole area on the Ivy Corridor that they're going to radically change, and I'm fine with that. I knew that there was a university here, and I knew that they owned that land, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm not, however, and I totally understand that when you lose your business, and I'm very sympathetic to the hotel owners that obviously you're going to rebuild and you're going to take that opportunity. But build a 60-foot beautiful boutique hotel. Like this whole idea of a special use permit, I'll get into exactly, I think 80 feet is too tall. One of the things my husband and I, who's also here, love to do is we go and sit on Carr's Hill on the stairs or on the benches there, and we watch the band practice. Like, an 80-foot hotel in that sight line is going to make that a radically different experience. It's just not fitting. It's not fitting. Height means more density. Density means more traffic. I'm actually not against density. I grew up in Oakland, California. Like, if I can see my neighbor when I go to the bathroom, I don't care, because I grew up in Oakland. And density is a fact of life for me. I don't need to live where I can't see my neighbors. I'm a city girl. I like being in a city girl. And I understand that, we need more. UVA is a big draw. It makes sense to have accommodations, although there are so many hotels being built in this town, it's crazy. But the more important issue for me here is the context of the need. There's not a community benefit to a taller hotel at this space. I believe that the Patels are requesting a permit, unless I'm missing something, they're requesting this SUP because it's financial feasibility. Like, they have to get it they have to make it taller to make it profitable to build it, and I get that. But I get that there are realities about construction costs. But on the other hand, the very fact that land, they're not making any more of land in this town. We are, like Dr. Bellamy said, we're locked in. We got what we have. And that controls, that controls land value. And so that land value is going to stay the same. In fact, it's going to increase. And eventually, someone will find a way to add value, to do something with that property, to make money with it, without needing an SUP. So while they don't even say they need it to be bigger, to be feasible, I think that's why they're requesting it. It's not just they want it to be bigger. I don't think so. And even if that were true, I still don't. And so my point is, the need for financial feasibility to rebuild something like that is not a justifiable need for a special use permit. And this is why. Can I just finish my thought? Okay. Zoning exists for a reason. It's a set of rules that basically prevents any landowner from doing whatever she wants for her own interests. That's good, because buildings have impact that are long-lasting, permanent, basically, right? So the only real way to redress the grievance of an objectionable building is not to build it at all. Zoning protects us, it protects everyone who isn't building the building. And as such, the way I interpret special means the people whom the zoning protects are the ones whose job it is to say, yes, this project, whatever it is special, meaning it has value that overrides why the zoning is there, meaning no one can just build willy-nilly. And this process seems to me to be operating a little bit scarily on the opposite principle. It presumes that if the commission and the council are okay with it, regardless of how many individuals aren't, that the burden of a special permit has been met. But I actually think about it the opposite way. I think that the commission and the council's job is to say no to a special permit unless the people protected by the zoning say, yes, we want this. We want to opt out of our own rules. This is our zoning rule. We already agreed to this.
Thank
60
you.
feet is it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Is your name Andrew?
Good evening, my name's Serena Scott Thomas. I'm a
No, you're not
resident-
next.
Oh. Say that again.
Yeah, there was a sheet.
Yeah, there's a sheet,
Oh,
yes,
I can
yeah.
make it
Mhm. Okay, yes.
Hi, my name's Andrew Grimshaw. I live on Alderman Road with Jessica. So I'm going to try to be very brief. 80 feet is tall. I've lived in a lot of cities in the world. I've visited a lot of cities. I particularly like European cities because they have maximum heights on their buildings that are actually fairly low. And these heights have been held for a long time, and it makes the cities much more livable and breathable than having giant buildings. From 80 feet, I can soar almost a mile in a glider just falling out of the sky. So that's really high, okay? So, and once again, I agree with this note that my wife presented that, you know, the zoning is to protect the other people in the city, not the property owners in a lot of ways. And I don't see why special means somebody wants to make more money. Special should be benefiting the community in concrete ways. And I don't believe personally that this will benefit the rest of the community significantly, but it will in fact impose things on us. And to the gentleman who mentioned 1%, I'm sure he took queuing theory, and he knows very well that when that 1% comes in play, depending on the current load on the system, queue delays can in fact increase dramatically in traffic conditions. So a 1% change can in fact result in 10, 15, 20% increases in delays. So don't let small numbers fool you. That corner is already heavily congested, and a lot of people avoid that corner by driving through at high rates of speed, which the city, by the way, doesn't respond to calls for, into the neighborhood. So I think traffic is important. I don't see what the benefit to the community really is for this, and I'll leave while the light's still green. Thank you.
Thank you. Vestia Gordon.
I'm not contagious. I'm Vesta Gordon. I live on Bollingwood Road in the Lewis Mountain neighborhood. The building is too big. There's no real benefit to the neighborhood. And if you're believing what the Patels tell you about traffic, I've got a bridge I'll sell you. What I don't understand is one of the conditions to minimize traffic congestion, and they are going to prohibit left turn, anyway, whatever turn they're going to do, you're going to throw. People are going to come down from the airport, want to turn left into the motel, and they can't because it's going to be a no left turn. Please consider that. Please do not give them this SUP, and I turn my rest of my time over to Serena Scott Thomas.
I don't think it's like the Senate.
Try again.
I apologize. My name's Serena. Good evening. I live also in the Lewis Mountain neighborhood, and I have here a letter from Bitsy Waters, and she asked that it be read out to you. It is as follows. Dear Mayor and Council members, I'm just back from 2 weeks away and won't be able to attend the public hearing tonight, but I want to urge you once again to deny the SUP for the Gallery Court Hotel to build to 80 feet. I seldom ask Council to vote against a Planning Commission recommendation, but in this case, I think it's very important, not just for this project, but for the future of our city, that you deny this extra height and density. This is not primarily a neighborhood issue. It is about what we want our city to look like and how we want it to function moving forward. It is about managing our relationship with the university and setting a course for the future redevelopment of the Emmett Street corridor. Granting this permit would set a precedent for building to 80 feet at this intersection and in this corridor, and will create the kind of close to the street height and density the majority of residents of Charlottesville have said loudly and clearly they do not want. 60 feet is enough. This SUP is not in conformance with a number of the recently adopted entrance corridor guidelines, a bad precedent. It has dedicated its first 3 levels to structured parking, with only a faux cafe with no kitchen capability to give a false impression that it adds street life. It provides no on-site stormwater management and will add traffic volume and complexity to one of the city's most congested intersections. I will skip to the end. As always, I appreciate your consideration and hope you will see fit to deny this SUP, so the city, not a specific development project, will adopt and implement the policies and regulations that will ensure the kind of redevelopment we want in this major entrance corridor. Thank you. Bitsy Waters. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Askonis. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Anna Askunis. I am a member of the Lewis Mountain Neighborhood Association Board of Directors. I'd like for all of the people who are here tonight from Lewis Mountain, if you would raise your hand. I think it's important for the board to see this is really important to our neighborhood. And before I say anything about the SUP, I do want to say I've really been appalled tonight by the raised voices, by the pointed fingers, by the incivility, by members of the public who attended calling other people on the council or the attorney liars. It's just shocking to me. It's shocking. And I apologize. I don't know how you all manage it. It would be very, very distressing for me to serve in your position and listen to people talk in that way. All of us are very concerned about the SUP, about the 80 feet. We're concerned about the traffic. And we're concerned about also aesthetics. I know you all have heard a lot of people with concerns about what happened on West Main and the feeling that buildings are slapping you in the face, that there's not enough setback. And as Bitsy, who was a mayor of Charlottesville at one point, pointed out, when you have to have 12 conditions in order to build something, I think there's a problem. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. I'm Peter Gray.
Good evening, Mayor Walker and Council. Thank you all for your time today. I'm Peter Gray. I'm a resident of Thompson Road. I'm a professor at UVA at the McIntyre School, where we teach our students to maximize the value, the commercial value of assets, always within the confines of the law. And there are legal structures in place at many levels to codify the public interest in ways that put limits on commercial maximization, appropriate limits. One is municipal zoning code enacted by prior generations of city council. Zoning lays out very clearly what the uses are for a piece of land, and from these facts, business people figure out what a piece of land is worth. There is an application process for situations where property owners can make an argument that existing zoning is not in the public interest. The SUP before you for 140 Emmett Street is not one of those situations. This is quite clearly a case where someone who is, I am sure, a fine and upstanding business person is simply doing what business people are supposed to do, trying to maximize the value of their asset by adding density, unfortunately, at the expense of the citizens of Charlottesville. The entrance corridor vision statement reads as follows. Emmett Street has the potential to become more of an urban boulevard with a lively pedestrian activity and a greater mix of and integration of uses. Clearly, this structure would not fit within such an envisioned character. UVA and our new president, Jim Ryan, are Jim Ryan, are placing a major focus on how to appropriately respect the context and location of this very large corridor parcel and finding uses that enhance the city and the university in the long term. I do not believe that the proposed project provides these enhancements, and the representation by consultants for the owner of what UVA is planning to do does not match anything that I have seen presented by the university. The proposed SUP has many aspects that are not merely unappealing, but downright harmful to the quality of our city. At an important point of entry to the University District, it will set a terrible precedent in terms of density. The proposed extra height is completely out of character for the street, jammed right up against the road. It will have a significant negative impact on quality of street life at this key entrance corridor. The size and scale are simply not appropriate for this location. The consultants claim that the reduction in turning traffic that comes from the removal of the restaurant across the street offsets in some way their incremental cross-sidewalk traffic, misses the point that the overall goal for this section of street is less cross-sidewalk traffic, not the same and not increased amounts. I see the dismay in the eyes of citizens at what has become of West Main Street, as developers have been allowed to maximize their density and profits at the public expense. Please do not let this happen to another important corridor. Please act as our voice to stand against this SUP that increases the value of one parcel of land at the collective expense. Thank you.
Bill Rockwell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Bill Rockwell. I'm a resident at 119 Cameron Lane, and I'm also co-chair for the Lewis Mountain Neighborhood Association. I also wanted to say I'm clearly not in shape to do what you guys do, which I appreciate your patience and your stamina for these meetings. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Neighborhood Association to express our concern about the Planning Commission's previous, albeit somewhat disjointed recommendation of this SUP, and to urge the council to reconsider and deny this SUP request. I'm joined here tonight by other board members and neighborhood residents. I think you saw an indication before. Unfortunately, Bitsy couldn't be here tonight, but I am so glad that we got to read her well-crafted and articulate statement. The association supports Bitsy's original statement that she made at the Planning Commission public hearing back on the 11th. And we also support her current or most recent letter to the council, which opposes the SUP. And for all of those well-articulated points that that she noted in that letter. I wanted to briefly summarize and re-emphasize some of the concerns she voiced in her letter. I think the main, there were a number of them. I think the primary issue, again, is the 80-foot buildings, as proposed in the SUP, is out of scale and out of context for this location, and in particular within the Gateway Corridor, and as a lead-in to a World Heritage Site right up the road. Indeed, the large number of conditions added by the Planning Commission to mitigate the admitted adverse impacts on the entrance corridor are an indication of the conflicted debate that we saw that evening by the Planning Commission members to somehow justify a recommendation, I guess. The building height was the primary impact identified, or the adverse impact identified by the entrance corridor review board. Yet, other than some basic site concessions, including a U-bike station, which is great, stormwater, best management practices, nominally increased sidewalk and tree buffer widths, the only condition that really addressed this primary issue of height is the last one, all the way down the list at number 12. The project design shall include features or elements that will reduce the apparent height of the southwest corner of the building, quote, tower. That is sort of a classic CYA statement. Like, we couldn't figure it out. We thought it was kind of important, but we'll throw it in there. For the height issue being a primary issue, it seemed as if that could have been articulated much more strongly. It's almost as if they were just trying to get to an end of recommending it. And again, our point is that we recognize the owner's by right to build another hotel. It's just that and I've been hearing the discussion tonight about the comprehensive plan, all the input that goes into that, the zoning ordinance, how long it takes to make changes and to get things in order. Why don't we just follow it? 60 feet is fine. I appreciate your time.
Thanks. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Julia Jones, and I'm a city resident, also in the Lewis Mountain neighborhood. I've lived down the street from the previously existing hotel for 25 years, and I applaud the owner to rebuild as an independent hotel owner. I asked council, though, to deny the SUP, echoing and amplifying the facts that Bitsy Waters' letter emailed to all of you earlier today and you heard tonight, keeping in mind that the request is for not just a small exception to the rule, but an increase of 33% above an already maximum height. That's a huge number. What is concerning to me is the incongruity by which the Planning Commission came to recommend this SUP. I attended that Planning Commission meeting a few weeks ago, and there was much discussion about the negative feedback received from the construction of the apartments on West Main, we've heard a lot about tonight, which reached the same height as the Gallery Court Hotel SUP application. Yet they decided to recommend that the same mistake be repeated on Emmett Street. Planning Commission acknowledged the many problems that will be made worse by granting this permit by adding 12 conditions to their approval. In my view, this recognition should have led to denial. People spoke on behalf of the developer and the owner, touting his longevity as a business owner and upstanding community member. While I have no doubts this is all true, the personality and community position of the developer should not be a factor in the decision. Denying this SUP doesn't take away the owner's right to build a by-right facility, take the insurance money and build elsewhere, or sell to the highest bidder. He has multiple options. If you decide to grant this SUP in spite of the current ordinance, you should expect every property owner along that entrance corridor to apply for the same. I urge you to play the long game and uphold the guidelines which are already in place. Thank you.
Thank you. You can. Yep, there's you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Ruffner. I'm a member of Lewis Mountain Neighborhood, Alderman Road. Unlike all of my other neighbors, I am here to speak in favor of granting the special use permit. Two principal reasons. First, a lot has been made about the height and scale of the building being inappropriate for the setting. If you take a quick look at the study that was provided to the Planning Commission, it's pretty clear that the height of the building, or the top of the building, I should say, not the absolute height, is very much in keeping with the structures that are on Carr's Hill, with the existing parking garage. If you go further up Emmett Street towards the university, in keeping with the Newcomb Hall parking garage, I think the height mitigation things that were listed at the end of the recommendations were from a recommendation I made to the Planning Commission, that they emulate the stipulations that were placed on the Newcomb Hall garage when the same objections were raised to the Newcomb Hall garage about proximity to the street, about the height when that structure was enlarged. And so I'm not sure they're exactly the same, but that was certainly a suggestion that was made. So I don't think this is out of keeping at all with the existing context of space. It's not really out of keeping with parking garages, it's not out of keeping with train tracks, and that has been a commercial corridor for a number of years. It's not a beautiful piece of architecture, but it's certainly very much in keeping with everything the university's been throwing up in the research parks and elsewhere on grounds for the past 10 or 15 or 20 years. So it's not horrible, it's nondescript, It's moderately attractive. It's certainly as attractive as the structures that are towering from Carr's Hill over the entire landscape in that area. The height, the top of the building is roughly approximate with Mary Mumford Dorm, which the university has on one corner of Ivy. It is true that the Cavalier Inn will be gone, is in the process of being demolished now, so there won't be as much of that there. Some of the other lower small buildings have been removed, but I think the structure is very much in keeping with the kind of construction that's been going on. I think that this is more just a case of no, we don't want it. Objection. We heard similar objections around the Ivy Road parking garage back in 2001 when that was constructed, a similar kerfuffle, attempts to block it at all costs. In this case, I think there's a view that if you keep it to 60 feet, you'll make it unviable, and the owner of the property will be forced to sell to the University Foundation, who can then come in and, I think everybody imagines, build something they would like. I would suggest take a good look at the indoor practice facility just on the other side of the tracks if you want to see some beautiful university architecture that looks just wonderful. So, thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Would anybody else like to speak?
Roy, you don't even live over there.
I did live in Lambeth my second year, actually, even though I think a little bit closer than most people here. And actually, I think I never once walked to class along Emmett Street because that streetscape there is so hostile to pedestrians that I climbed the stairs up by Lambeth Field, which yeah, that's big for me. I think this is a little bit out of my lane. Obviously, I care about housing mostly, but I think it's important to keep in mind that housing and hotels are kind of fungible, that if we're going to build this project anyway at 60 feet, that if we add an extra 20 feet of hotel rooms, those are rooms that are going to draw tourists or people coming into town away from either Airbnbs or other hotels that we see popping up all over the rest of the city, moving down West Main, up Cherry. I think aesthetically speaking, which is what most of the comments here today have focused on, and of course the adverse impact determined by the Entrance Corridor Review Board, I highly question the validity of that. As you guys know, this is a low elevation site. What's there now is not particularly visually appealing, even before it burnt down. No offense. And I think it's actually very much in line as a change with what's going on the other side of Lewis Mountain, where I lived my first year in college, where I live in Webb Hall, which was an old motel-looking building that they tore down and then built a 6-story Watson Webb Hall that looks actually a lot like this hotel, except that it's on the top of a hill and not below a railroad trestle. So I would submit that more rooms are good, put them somewhere, and I'd like to conclude with, I think, someone referenced the talk last month at the Planning Commission meeting about why we would make the same decision that we did on West Main and on Cherry. And I'd like to close with the quote that I think they're referencing from Tania at the Planning Commission session, which is that we allowed these buildings to tower over Fifeville and 10th and Page because we thought they were in the best interest of the city. Why would we change what we're going to do because it's going to be near a relatively wealthy neighborhood where a former mayor can mount an organized, concerted opposition?
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Come on.
And it's urban zoning. That's the name.
Good evening. Thank you, members of the City Council. I'd like to respond to Mr. Ruffner's comment that it's always happened in Charlottesville and that it will keep happening. I don't think that's a good argument to let it keep happening. I think the long view is the way to go, like Ms. Galvin said, as far as planning goes for the city, what kind of city we want to live in. The environment affects human beings psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. And if we keep putting up these mass-produced developments that are prefabricated by these development companies, you're going to have a homogeneous place. I've lived in Charlottesville. I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself. My name's John Alietta. I live in the Lewis Mountain neighborhood, and I've lived here most of my life. I'm from Charlottesville. I was born here, so I've seen it change quite a lot over my lifetime. And I've seen it change more rapidly and drastically over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and not in a good way. It seems to be cheapening each year. There's a little bit of Charlottesville that disappears each year, and I mean Charlottesville. And what is replacing Charlottesville is every place USA. You can go to other cities and see these mass developments popping up everywhere, and they look like they're just plonked down onto the landscape. They don't look like places that are distinctive in and of themselves. I wish it's like a vast system that's going up of strip malls, housing developments, or combination housing development strip malls all over the country. And I don't want to see Charlottesville fall prey to that. And that's why I oppose this SUP, because this design, this building, looks like a part of that. It is out of character with the city, with what's here now. And it would contribute to the homogenization of America and of Charlottesville. We would lose Charlottesville that much more with this 80-foot, beast on Emmett Street. It's the funkiness, the idiosyncrasy that makes a city, where you can go to a city and say, I've been there, and then go to another city and say, I've been there too. Whereas today it seems like you can go anywhere and say, oh, I've been to the same city. I don't want to see Charlottesville succumb to that. And in closing, I'll just say, don't let Charlottesville become part of any place USA. Let's keep what's distinctive about Charlottesville here and make it a place where people like to be, where it's special.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, closing public hearing. Thank you.
I have a couple questions, if I can ask, maybe Ms. Creasy.
Heather.
Or Heather, hi. So when I look at the drawings and the images, there's a 7-foot sidewalk, a 6-foot planting strip. So what is the setback from the edge of the sidewalk then for the building face? Because it looks like there's areas for the patio.
So that might be, I know they're using the setback from the property line as 5 feet, but if they're going from edge of curb line, they're probably gonna have to push the building back a little bit. And your question is from the edge of sidewalk
I just kind of want to get a
building.
sense of what that setback is from the public right-of-way. I know it can go from 5 feet to 30 feet, but is that area that you've reserved for the outside eating, is that within the public right-of-way?
No, nope. In fact, along the front of the property, 4 feet will be donated from the private property owner to a pedestrian easement to make space for the 7-foot sidewalk.
Okay, but then how deep is that patio then? Because that's on the other side of the sidewalk.
Right, so this patio is going to be truncated a little bit
Oh, I see.
in
So it's
response
triangular.
to, yeah, you have basically a rectangular shaped building on a trapezoidal shaped lot. So
But I'm just trying to get a sense of where does the 80-foot tall building start relative to the
it depends
street?
on what part of where on the frontage you are. So in the top left corner, where the edge of the building is at the 5-foot setback line,
Yeah.
it's there. Whereas the closer you get to the railroad tracks, it steps back, and the cafe then becomes
Like about 20 feet?
well, yeah, but I'd say average about 20 feet.
Okay,
sure.
so it's like 5 feet to 20 feet.
Yeah.
So it's a substantial average setback of about,
Yeah.
And And the concern from the planning commission specifically was where the pinch point is. So they kept talking about that tower. That's the southwest right there, where it's
Right.
closest to.
And again, just to say, a special use permit is in the zoning ordinance, it is allowed.
Correct. Yes.
It is not something that is prohibited. This extra height is allowed by the special use permit.
Right.
Those are the clarifying questions I needed to know. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Do we need a motion or, oh, this is a first.
Yeah, this is action.
Well, I'll get the ball rolling. But can we talk at all before, or?
You got 5 minutes after the meeting.
Well, after I make, well, I'm going to move to adopt the SUP as presented.
Okay.
And with the conditions outlined by the planning commission.
All right, is there a second?
I want to talk about this,
So somebody's got to second it to talk about it, or else, or the motion fails.
Am I the
So-
only one who wanted to talk about it? Because I don't want to waste everyone's time if no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I want to talk about it. I mean, I'm actually in favor of it, so.
Can you second it?
All right, I second it.
Okay, thank you. So I do have the floor first. And the distinction between a SUP and a rezoning, from my perspective, matters. The SUP is something that is in the zoning ordinance. It is allowed. Second, a lot has been made about the height. And I have asked, and thank you very much, Ms. Niemeyer, for your excellent responses to my questions. The heights of the buildings along Emmett Street they range between, they're around 77 feet. So there's already buildings that are closer to the Lewis Mountain neighborhood. This building is about 600 feet away from a neighborhood. We're not talking about like in Belmont, where that building is 6 feet away. This is 600 feet away from any neighborhood. And it's been interesting, the notion that this is too tall, and there's been references to urban European landscapes. Well, the reason why I asked for the width of the right-of-way is that when I've done my sketches, the spatial enclosure, the ratio of the height to the width between the spaces of the building is 1:1. That's an ideal spatial enclosure ratio from a pedestrian standpoint. And a famous planner, Reed Ewing, said, by making a street more room-like, we also make it pedestrian-friendly. Drivers respond to the sense of enclosure on a street by slowing down, making that street much more pedestrian-friendly. So, surprisingly for me, for once, our zoning with its SUP was actually doing good urban design. So I can't, the argument of the height isn't holding for me. Now, I've been told that we've got no community benefit here and that we don't want to lose Charlottesville, but right now it's an empty lot, parking lot, a Grayfield site that generates about $8,000 a year in property tax revenue. This would be replaced by a business, a family-owned business that is concealing all of its parking. It's not surface parking lot. It's in its footprint. The building mass is chiseled down. It's not one big block like the Cavalier Inn was. And it's also then generating $565,000 in property tax revenue. So when I crunch those numbers, I'm seeing that as close to being, well, geez, if that's about $50,000 in a year in debt service, it could help us support $10 million of bonding for affordable housing. So we've got to build somewhere in this city to generate the revenue to build the affordable housing that we know we need to do en masse. And this is not cheek and jowl to a residential neighborhood. It's just not. And so and it's replacing, it's like a one-for-one replacement for a hotel. A hotel is torn down, this one's going up. There's no additional hotel room, really. The current urban corridor zoning is saying directly that we're supposed to be moving towards a pedestrian orientation.
You're overlooking the traffic.
So, and the standards of review, the traffic we've been told that the traffic's not mattering. The traffic is not a significant increase, and it is within walking distance of all the uses that will be put in place there by the university. And the corner of Emmett Street, and this is something Councilor Signer and I had a problem with when the university was first presenting the plans to us about not having any development on the corner of Emmett and Ivy. It's going to be wide open. It's just wide open space that feeds into a stormwater treatment facility that's also doubles as a park. So, and then there's all the playing fields and the tennis fields. There's wide open space all around here. So I don't understand why that is presenting such a hardship to the neighborhood. Because it's not even near the neighborhood. And it's actually creating a spatial enclosure that is much more pedestrian oriented than we have today, that could actually cause the friction that we need to make the cars go slower so that it becomes a comfortable place to walk. So that's why I'm supporting this. We need urban buildings in the right place. And the last thing I'll say is relative to the housing memo I wrote back in the middle of August. We've got to create corridors that are engines for generating revenue. And Emmett Street could be one of them, West Main Street is one of them, Water Street is one of them, maybe Preston Avenue at some point. And then we capture that differential of revenue and we plow it into the housing fund. We've got to be smart about this. And that's my rationale.
I think, so Ms. Galvin, your thought is to utilize, in addition to the other points you made, but utilize essentially the tax revenue that may be generated into using those funds, or those monies rather, to be able to either float a bond, but use it specifically for the Affordable Housing Fund?
I think she's just saying that it'll be coming in.
It'll be coming in, but we could,
Designated.
Similar as we talked about with, like,
not as an
West End.
individual, because our staff has said that individual properties no, but as a district, we could. And individual properties are just very challenging to monitor, but as a district, if you became that Emmett Street corridor district.
Right. But what would it take for us to make this, one, Emmett Street corridor, and for two, at the expense of what we're clearly hearing from a lot of people saying that they're not too particularly happy about the additional height. I don't think what I'm hearing from the public is that they were upset about the actual hotel, because the hotel has been there forever. Their concern was the additional height.
Well,
so can I mean, I support this project. I mean, you have the revenue here, but you also, I mean, look at all the hotels that are chain hotels that we have in the city, and you have a owner who has been committed to maintaining a business, independent business, and hiring employees. So contributing to, the city overall. From the complaints that I've heard, the Planning Commission recommendation, it doesn't seem like this request of the requests that I have, and I know we're here and we're talking about today, but looking over time that I've seen approved, I just don't know why we would not be supportive of this project.
Okay.
Or at least I'll say that's why I am in support of the project.
I can make an argument for why one wouldn't, which is in contrast to the discussion we just had, and again, this night is very, and I would just, as a matter of procedure, I'd just point out that for the whole debate we've been having the last 3 or 4 years about efficiency and how do we run our meetings, we have in our rules that we try to end at 11 o'clock. It's in our procedures, and it's 11:15 right now, and we didn't get started on regular business until 9 o'clock tonight. And it's not any one person to blame, but I would like for us to try and work harder because the, you know.
Could we talk about
public,
this after?
Well, but I want to make the point because the public transit closes at 11 o'clock. We have 2 more items after this. 3 of us have young kids, and it's when we.
But you're
when everything
delaying
goes
us
on and
being
on.
able to.
Yeah,
go.
but I still want to make the point. So, and I think I have the right to make the point because we're not violating, we're not following our own rules. I think the argument would be that in the absence of a compelling public policy rationale, we don't grant SUPs. So the debate about affordable housing was, in that case, housing study, density, you look closely at that concern, at least that's how I would think about it. And then you could grant an SUP because you would make an exception. In this case, I sort of could see the arguments for it, but we do have a lot of hotels coming online. I see the merits of this particular project and the fact that it's a local minority-owned, family-owned business. But I don't let's not do interruptions to the floor, like for everybody. I don't see it as that compelling here, and I do think that I don't know the finances, the business and the construction finance vis-a-vis the revenue that you all are going to get with the floors, with the rooms that are enabled by the extra 20 feet. I imagine that is a delta that moves, you know, I don't know whether the project becomes unfeasible if you don't have the extra floor. That's kind of up to you all to figure out. I know what I heard is that the number of rooms are doubling compared to the business that you had before, and I know that construction is very expensive. But to me, the question at public policy is: do we find something so compelling that we don't follow the rules? And in this case, I don't. If it's just about adding more hotel rooms at this particular time in this particular area, I don't particularly see it right now. So that would be against all the other very meritorious things that you all have done. And I guess the question is, does the project go forward? I mean, there may be the votes for it, but that to me is how I would analyze it right here.
All right, anyone else?
I mean, I came in feeling like based on everything I had researched before, certainly feeling like this was something I was wanting to support, especially given the Planning Commission and where they landed. Certainly it's compelling to hear from the neighborhoods, but I also kind of recognize Ms. Galvin's point about the distance that it is. This is embedded within the neighborhoods, and for me, the topography of this area is such that I do feel that it's sitting and situated in such a way that it's 80-foot tall building next to some of these others, that there is a topography that does kind of allow for that. And I also commend them for wanting to put parking within the structure. That's really expensive. We know that it is, and I don't want to see gray space for parking, which is what I think was in the prior lot in that configuration, and that's very expensive to accommodate, and you have to make up for that somewhere. So I also feel like we don't have a lot of control over what's going to be built on the university's properties, and I'm just recognizing the vision that they've had, and there's obviously with some massing that we've seen and that you have shared as well. And I was part of that corridor introduction when they kind of proposed some of the visions that they had. But I will say that tonight, the biggest thing that got to me is just that question mark of that community benefit, though. And, you know, when we're talking about housing, I feel like I have a perspective on, like, you know, there's a lot of compromises I'm willing to make on that because it's such a driver of a need. But then Ms. Galvin also points out that we also have an opportunity to generate revenue, and we need to build for that revenue. So I'm certainly torn on this. I'm certainly one that really is an advocate for neighborhoods and wanting a quality of life in those neighborhoods. But again, I definitely see this as separate from the neighborhood. But the biggest question mark for me was that benefit, and what are overall. And I do think there are benefits for the community through the generation of revenue, and also what it can provide in terms of providing those inventories, as Rory mentioned earlier. And so I'm very torn. I think I'm probably leaning in favor, though.
Mayor Walker, if I would just make one small comment, is that it did meet the comprehensive plan's land use map for 2013. So this, and
That's
relative to, so to make a decision for an SUP, it has to match that, and it does.
Any other comment? Mr. Blair, do you have anything?
There has been some discussion, and not to belabor the point, but there is a mention of affordable housing in the general standards for issuance of SUPs, but it's actually, are there potential adverse impacts on, and then one of the adverse impacts is reduction in the availability of affordable housing in the neighborhood. So that is one consideration, you all. I know that that's been mentioned by a couple of counselors here in the discussion, and that is one consideration that's within the ordinance.
Mayor Walker, I'd like to call the question. Are we voting? We're voting, right?
Did you have, I thought you had a comment.
No, I'd like to call the question to vote, right?
All right. So, all in favor? All right, it carries 4-1 for approval.
SUP is approved.
So when you say they weren't displacing anything.
So we're going to take a just quick 5-minute break.
No, it was, it's the reduction in the availability. So that is a factor that can be considered.
Right, but
Yeah.
they were already.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a resolution, allocation of fiscal year 2019 Charlottesville Affordable Housing Funds. Good evening, Steele.
Good evening. I am Stacy Pethia, the Housing Program Coordinator for the city. On May 7th, the Notice of Funding Availability was issued, soliciting proposals for FY 2019 Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund funding. Staff received a total of 5 funding proposals by the application deadline, which was June 8th. These applications were reviewed by members of the HACS Allocation Subcommittee on both June 22nd and June 26th. Through those discussions of the subcommittee, the members agreed to recommend 3 of the 5 proposals for funding. The subcommittee's recommendations are as follows. 1, allocate $375,000 to AHIP for their critical rehab and repair program. This level of funding will assist approximately 45 low-income homeowners preserve their homes, enhance their home health environment, and remain safe at home for years to come. To comply with the Code of Virginia, Section 15.2958.5, assistance for each rehab project will be provided to qualifying homeowners as a 0% interest loan secured by a deed of trust and forgivable over a period of time depending on the amount of assistance provided. The subcommittee is also recommending providing $1,444,000 for the Carlton Views 3 project. Carlton Views 3 is the 4th and final phase of a mixed income, mixed use development located at 1337 Carlton Avenue. Phases 1 and 2 of the development included construction of the Blue Ridge Pay Center and Carlton Views 1, a 54-unit apartment building providing housing for households with incomes between 40 and 60% of area median income. Phase 3, which is currently under development, undergoing the site plan approval process, will add an additional 48 units to the site, and those will all be affordable at the same income levels. Carlton Views 3, once complete and if approved, will provide an additional 48 affordable units at the same income levels, including 12 fully accessible units, which will be reserved for persons with disabilities. The HAC Allocation Subcommittee also recommends providing $585,000 to Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville for their Equity Housing Initiative. This initiative encompasses several different programs, including acquisition of sites for affordable housing development in the Laughlin Hill and Piedmont Avenue neighborhoods, enhanced down payment assistance for very low income residents, an anti-gentrification rental conversion pilot program, a Pathways to Housing program designed to assist extremely low wealth families with achieving self-sufficiency, and a public housing rehab Section 3 skills and job development program that is offered in partnership with the CRHA, FAR, and the Charlottesville Works Initiative. Staff supports all of these recommendations, with one restriction related to the funding for the Carlton Views 3 project. And that restriction would be making release of the funding contingent upon approval of a rezoning for the site, as well as their award of low-income housing tax credits for the project. But approving the funding now allows Carlton Views to apply for their tax credits in March. And that way I would just encumber those funds under a purchase order, and if none of those other 2 conditions are met, the money goes back into the housing fund and we can reissue a notice of funding availability. And I am happy to answer any questions.
So each of these is treated individually, Mr. Blair?
Correct. There are 3 resolutions.
So we'll be voting 3 different times?
There should be, yes.
And then, so you're saying we need to add some language then to this resolution?
What I've done in the past is I didn't add it to the resolution, I added it to the grant agreement.
Okay.
So, who's on the subcommittee?
Do you have that list? Because I can't off the top of my head remember.
Oh, I can list some people that were in the room. I was one of them.
Right.
I wasn't part of the final voting. I sat
No, so there were several voting members, which included Phil Duranzio, the chair of the HAC,
Leslie
Ford, the vice chair of the HAC.
Estelle Rainsford.
Estelle Rainsford, who's
a
Belmont
Carlton
neighborhood. Right. Jody Lehendro, the planning commissioner. Lisa Torres from the school board. Who? Oh, Patricia Romer from UVA.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
In sum, it's everyone on the hack who would never apply for funding from the Affordable Housing Fund.
Oh, you can come up, I guess, if you have, yeah, so people can hear you. Yes.
The membership of that subcommittee by default is everyone who is on the hack who would have no reason to ever apply for any funding from
Okay.
the Affordable Housing Fund for any reason whatsoever. So that's sort of the default group that's in it.
And I sat in the meetings, but I didn't involve myself in any of the scoring or anything. I just was listening.
Mhm.
So.
Are there any other questions? So I have some questions about just the accountability piece for the organizations applying for funding. I received 3, even though I can't locate the third one, but I shared the other 2 with Mr. Murphy. Concerns about Carlton Views and some quality issues. And then a few months ago, I received some concerns about habitat, just properties, just construction, you know, electrical, mode issues, and we didn't make it over to Carlton Views today, or at least I didn't. Dr. Bellamy went, but I just want to make sure that we put something in place to ensure that when we are investing taxpayers' dollars, that there is quality, even though these are just much-needed services, and that we're taking complaints if we're getting them. And I don't know what the oversight looks like since we don't actually own.
Right.
And I'm having that conversation with people to make, you know, hopefully that they'll feel comfortable with not just talking to me. But 2 of the emails I did forward, and I spoke with Dan a few months ago about the concerns that I heard from Habitat. But I would like the city to just, you know, figure out a way to place emphasis on quality and making sure that the funding is being spent.
So I know probably not the issues that you heard about Carlton Views. There were some other ones that came through our office, and the inspectors did go out and inspect the property, and some changes and things are being fixed on the exterior of the building, definitely. And I have spoken with the developer of Carlton Views. They are not happy with the property management company that they are working with, so they are addressing issues related to property management.
I can say when I went over today, a lot of folks not happy.
Right.
So for me, it makes me a little uneasy with giving or us saying that we're going to allocate these funds when I heard a lot of not so good things today. And granted, I was there today. I mean, I've been over before, but I was there not long, maybe 30, 45 minutes. So I talked to, I think, maybe 10, 15 people, but it wasn't good. Nor did I like what I saw. So, I mean, again, when Mayor Walker talks about the accountability piece, I think the question becomes, what exactly are we going to do? And I'm not saying you will have to have that answer today.
Right.
It's just to make me feel a little comfortable in regards to giving this money, taxpayers' money,
And the concerns you were hearing were specific to construction issues.
Yeah, excuse me. Well, construction and the management, for that matter,
Right.
like how they're being treated.
Right. So
and I don't want to go into people's
right. No. And so that the the developer and owner is aware of the property management issues, and they are working to address that. I spoke with them a couple weeks ago, so they're on that end of things. But we can, you're right, I won't have an answer of how to fix that tonight, but we can work to put something in place.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we get process opportunities that we have here, just to kind of have that follow-up and understand, and also having council hear back from that, because this is obviously, relatively new that, this level of funding is going out every year, and there's a few years of history here now that, you're going to start to hear those things.
Right. I need to do some, I'm not sure what we can do since we don't own the properties, but I will figure.
Even just an awareness,
it out.
yeah.
If I can ask a question though, but with any kind of disbursement of the CAF, there is a contractual agreement, correct?
Yes.
So can we not amend that agreement to make sure that there's some follow up with, maybe we have an outside inspection company just visit the sites once a year or every 6 months or something like that? Because there really is a question of our responsibility of making sure that our money is being well spent and that the people are being taken care of well.
Agreed. I will look into that, absolutely.
Is that something that?
Yeah, is that
sort of the idea of a clawback? Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
What's our remedy?
Something of the council, as part of the grant agreement, would ask that there's a independent inspection, and then over a time period, if, in which the inspections would be conducted, and then there would be standards within the agreement to meet these inspections, and if they didn't, then a portion of the grant could be clawed back.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's
I like
typical
that.
in economic development agreements of a clawback provision.
Yep.
We could look at that as a possibility.
Yeah. that's
Mr.
good.
Blair, I just want to make sure
It's like we enable
that you all give the city attorney's office some time
Yeah.
to
Right,
research.
right.
I think we have a
would need
landlord-tenant
to take a look
issue
at that as
too,
well.
right? Because
Exactly.
our first blush at this was, we'd be happy to do an inspection if we're invited in by an individual tenant, right? To say that, we're going to come in with people who are leasing properties and go into each unit, I don't know. That's a legal question. I'd like you all to spend some more time
we would
on.
look into that with this possibility of a clawback. But I'm thinking more of structural issues that could be inspected in terms of an annual inspection for 3 years, 5 years, something
Maybe a
like you.
time limit.
Right.
Because we don't give $1.4 million to everybody. I mean, I think
not
there's public
chump
money's involved here, so it's really important that we have some sort of accountability.
Yeah.
So
And this isn't the only time. I mean, the CDBG funding went towards, even though that's a different pocket of money, but I just think that when we are allocating this amount of money, there's dollars coming out of the budget also for some, projects that we just need to make sure that it's good quality work.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we deal with like a tenant privacy issue.
Certainly.
And make sure that we're not going and inspecting units that are, somebody doesn't want you in there, right? Regardless of how the project was originally funded, they're not, it's not like it's subject to a Section 8 voucher or a CRHA inspection. And so just want to be careful about that before we promise you that can happen.
Wasn't the Affordable Housing Fund created through enabling legislation? We were able to do it.
It was tied to
Because-
the SUP.
Yeah, so I'd wonder what we're able to do. I mean, maybe that fining would be another remedy. I mean, the question is really what's the remedy if somebody doesn't meet our standards? And there may be other remedies that would be easier, but it still would require.
Could be. But we
it could be
can
the
look at that
clawback,
idea
yeah.
also of a clawback as well, because, again, if you had like a 5-year period, and you had the consent of the property owner.
Yeah.
That'll look different for what different partners that we're engaging with. So not everybody
Oh,
is the same in
sure.
this. Obviously, we have three different services
Yeah.
being provided just here with these three that we're allocating funding to. They have very different business models and winners in
Right.
which they're contributing to our affordable housing.
Right.
So, okay.
But I think for each of these, the conversations that I've had about Habitat homes, I have the concerns, full disclosure, personal too, about AHIP, and then, Carlton View. So I just think if there's something in place that anyone who receives funding understands that there could possibly be, if we go to someone's house and they say, we don't want you to come in, then we can't do, the inspection. But I think that people would welcome making sure that, there has been quality work done to their properties.
And I would just like to add, though, we do need to understand what our standards are.
Yeah.
And that's not been articulated ever by this body.
Yes.
So we definitely would need models.
Yep.
Okay. So can I
Right.
start making motions?
Well, is this a public?
Nope.
No,
Public
it just
hearing.
says
We're past all
resolution.
that now. There's no one left. I'm just kidding.
So, why isn't this on here as a?
This is a resolution.
Mhm.
So this is not something that's
I
requires.
believe it's because council already
Appropriated
appropriated the
funds.
money for the purpose of affordable housing, and this is just a recommendation from your committee.
Okay. So we didn't want to hear from.
No, the question is why it's not a public hearing, Dr. Bethia.
Okay.
I think if we're prepared to move forward, I think everyone's fine with us moving forward, right?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just one by one?
Yep.
Sir? I move we adopt a resolution allocating Charlottesville Affordable Housing Funds for Albemarle Housing Improvement Program's critical rehab and repair project for $375,000.
Second.
All right. And vote.
Oh, wait, don't we have discussion?
We've already,
Already had
I just said to you.
That's fine. That's fine.
All right, that carries 3-2 in favor of the resolution.
All right, I move we adopt a resolution of the allocation of Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund for Carlton View's 3 in development project for $1,440,000.
All right.
Second.
So, wait, so I know we discussed the
discussion.
crawl bat.
Okay.
This is just a new term for me. But how do
Didn't
we,
just have a discussion about?
so,
Just hear what-
yeah, we've had discussion, but I'm still not clear. Like, how do,
They're going to check and get back to us. They don't have the answer yet.
so then why are
We're
we
gonna-
voting on
We're
it?
gonna look at a process for how we can have more accountability. We've agreed to that
So,
process.
I don't get, why don't we wait to vote until we hear back from that process? $1.4 million is a lot of
There's a
money.
deadline for getting the LIHTC
The LIHTC
application in.
grant. Okay.
All right.
Is there a second?
Second.
Kathy, all right. And vote.
Is that not on?
Is anyone
It's
on?
not on.
Huh.
It didn't work.
Broke it. Is it right?
Got a few buttons over here.
All right. And that carries 3-2. All right.
All right. I move we adopt a resolution for the allocation of Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund for Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville Equity Housing Initiatives in the amount of $585,000.
Is there
Second.
got it? All right. And vote. Okay, that carries 5-0. All right. Thank you. Are you here for the
She's
next
back.
one? All right, number 6, resolution allocation of funds, $200,019.40 for completion of citywide housing strategy. First to one reading.
Good evening again. I am coming tonight to request funding from the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund to support the completion of a comprehensive housing strategy. I have asked Sunshine Mathon to actually do the presentation and discuss the request with you, as he was the one that presented it to you originally at the joint HAC City Council work session, so I felt it would be appropriate for him to follow that up.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Sunshine Mathon, and I'm here tonight as a representative of the Housing Advisory Committee, HAC. When the HAC previously submitted a proposed scope for community engagement at our joint work session a few weeks ago, it was embedded within a set of housing-related topics that were sometimes difficult to sort and discuss. Nonetheless, we did our collective best to listen and respond to the concerns expressed both by council members and the members of the public. In particular, first you'll note that the proposed framework of the scope has changed. It identifies community engagement as one of a number of critical aspects of the overall development of an affordable housing strategy. Second, under project management, you'll note a list of justifications for an outside consultant. This list of rationales was developed in a meeting with representatives from both FAR and legal aid. Many of the reasons that they actually listed there actually came from them in the development of those. To be clear, this does not preclude local organizations from responding to an RFP in part or in total. And in fact, I would expect any successful RFP response to include partnerships with local organizations for obvious reasons. Third, the specific identified engagement strategies absolutely have to use community-based, non-traditional methods to prioritize the voices of the communities who have been historically ignored or discounted. Fourth, you'll note a detailing of specific tactics and responsibilities. Some of these require coordination by a future consultant, but with some work to be completed by others, such as the HAC or NDS. This acknowledges the coordinated and collaborative effort necessary to complete the work overall. Lastly, the HAC strongly believes that allocating resources to the development of a strategic housing plan is critical to the city's efforts to understand, plan for, and achieve short, medium, and long-term solutions to the affordable housing crisis in our city. To that end, in addition to the recommendations proposed for the completion of the housing strategy, the HAC also recommends or requests a schedule for regular joint HAC City Council work sessions, similar to the one we had previously, but over the next year, to include 6 meetings over the next year starting in November. These meetings will be topical and educational in nature and be designed to provide guidance and insight for the adoption of a final affordable housing strategy. If agreed upon, the HAC will recommend topics for each work session ahead of time so we're clear on what the agenda items are throughout the calendar year. The first work session, ideally in November, is our proposal is to be focused on assessing the feasibility of closing the affordable housing gap identified by the Housing Needs Assessment under current zoning, land use, and funding conditions in the city. And the purpose of that is to help provide us a baseline, provide all of us a baseline of understanding what's possible as we move into the affordable housing strategy, so we know what has to change for us to be able to achieve it. Related to that, we've reached out actually initially to Charlottesville Tomorrow as well with the idea that those bi-monthly meetings would also be coupled with strategic articles that Charlottesville Tomorrow would produce to help educate the public as a whole as we dive into each particular topic.
So, one of the things that troubles me, when we had this discussion during the housing meeting, we talked about from the community engagement piece, one fear was that consultants would be hired and then they have to work with the same organizations that do the community outreach, while those same organizations would get a very small piece of the pie and the consultant gets the bigger piece. And I still don't hear how that's addressed.
So the proposed budget does not identify that, say, for example, the $120,000 that's identified for the consultants.
Mm-hmm.
If, and as I mentioned in my presentation, I would fully expect any proposal that would be successful to include partnerships with local organizations, which would include chunks of money out of that $120,000 for those organizations to honor their work and expertise in that process. And then additionally, the RFP does not say that it needs to be outside organizations. Any local organization would be absolutely welcome to apply for this, whether in total or in part.
Okay, makes sense. That makes sense. That's my only reservation, so.
I have a question. So, and I do very much appreciate the emphasis on the community engagement. What I'm not getting enough meat on is actually the content and the breadth and depth of the housing strategy itself. And by that I mean it's not only the housing fund we're talking about. It is tax policy. It is overall approach to future land use planning. Its relationships with the university and the county. So the comprehensive quality of what I would hope that we would create as our housing strategy doesn't pop out at me in this. And so when I don't see language like that, and I feel like it's very narrow, and that we're working with NDS as one department and HAC as one advisory group, I'm concerned about being too confined, not cross-departmental, not cross-agency, and quite honestly, NDS and HAC have had issues in the past coming to a consensus on what to give us as a council for review and adoption. And I'm just stating a fact. So that brought up my other concern or question: should this be bumped up to be a city manager's office contract management, where most of the work is still done with you and NDS, but to be able to go and get that breadth and depth, but also to make sure that someone steps in when there's going to be mediation, or of course that's what the consultant, I guess, would be there to do, but that's a tough position to put a consultant in, to have to mediate between a department and an advisory group. So the rules of the game have to be very, very clear. And so my question is have you thought that through, both the comprehensiveness of this scope and then who's managing it?
I don't have complete answers for you. I will say, having been through this process, or part of this process in Austin, starting about 5 years ago, the level of comprehensiveness that was absolutely required was complete. I mean, it was every department in the city, every player in the that was possible to play in the field needed to be there. Because the challenge, just as it is here, the challenge is so difficult to overcome. It requires everyone's aptitude and expertise in that regard. And honestly, the document that emerged out of the process that happened in Austin is a 70 or 80-page document that lists every single possible tool that is available, because you need every single possible tool. There is no, I can guarantee you, there is no silver bullet to solving our affordable housing crisis. No one in the country, no state, no city, no state has solved this in any way, shape, or form. Everyone's challenged by it. And there is no single solution that's going to get any city there, including ourselves. So it requires every tool possible out there, which includes zoning, land use, incentives, structures, a whole gambit of comprehensive. So we didn't get into the detailing of that. Honestly, maybe because, at least in part, I made the assumption that was obvious, but perhaps
no. Well,
but
it's not
clearly
written
that
down,
may not
it's
be.
not going to happen.
Right. Fair enough. So the other comment I would make is that this comes to you as a recommendation that we can certainly modify either on the fly, or ideally, if it needs to be modified after this session, in short order, because we need to get this. You know, I think there's strong general opinion that this needs to get moving as quickly as possible. So comments and ideas are welcome about how to strengthen the proposal, so that it feels as comprehensive as necessary and detailed as necessary.
I'm just curious what resources, Mr. Murphy, do you think would help us to kind of have that cross-departmental look? Like help kind of drive this from the city side?
Well, we didn't think about that prior to this, I will say that. I need a little bit of time to maybe talk with the full group of department heads. I have them all in Wednesday morning. I think we could probably add this to our agenda if you're going to cut across all the departments. I think that, for me, my big outstanding question about this and about our affordable housing effort in general is kind of what's the will for density and growth, right? And we talked briefly about this in the work session, and there continues to be, whenever there's any density, some feelings that are out there, right? And I would just point out that, we have stayed around 10% affordability for a long time. And if we were to double that percentage, which, we haven't effectively gotten from 10 to 15, but let's say 20% of all housing that gets built from here on out. No, I got to be real world about this, Wes. That means that we essentially have to double the population of Charlottesville to do it, right? And if you say, hey, let's be more aggressive, let's say a third of everything that gets built is going to be affordable. It still means taking us up to a population from like 48 to 75,000 people. So I wonder what the engagement is in this plan or in any plan about the growth discussion. Because that is really the crux of what needs to be discussed. There's only so much land, and where is it that another half of our population would go? That's of the greatest importance, I think, to the city manager's office.
So responding to that, that has absolutely been one of the discussion points within the HAC as well, which honestly is one of the reasons we had the idea of having regular bi-monthly work sessions so we can start to tackle those topics in discrete chunks and in a way that is not only useful for you in terms of your ultimate decisions that you have to make in the long term, but acts as a venue for the public to engage in that conversation as well. Because I absolutely agree, the question of density and where is the right place for it is what needs to be part of the analysis. And in particular, as I mentioned, our proposal for the first November meeting, if we were to agree to do this, is to dive into the question of the assessment of what's actually feasible with the amount of land that we have, with the current zoning that we have in place, with the funding mechanisms that are there. How close can we get to 4,000 units or 3,300 units or whatever the target number we look at? And then when we find that answer and it's inevitably going to fall short, then what is the density or the changes that need to be put in place and supported for us to actually get there in the long term?
And also answer the question, can those be supported from the community?
Right, and will they be supported by the community? That's correct.
I guess we're kind of getting into the discussion that happened after a motion, but because of how this is going, so I will. So my thinking is, I really admire and appreciate all the passion and the desire that is going into this. I have grave misgivings about doing this the consultant route, in part because when I ran for council, I heard misgivings about consultants, outside consultants, almost every day, door knocking around. And then being on council, I've seen that when you try and solve a really tough problem using an outside consultant, a lot of the time it doesn't. I could go, the arts plan worked this way. It created a beautiful plan that kind of mostly sat on a shelf, because when it's done in a one-off way by somebody coming outside, it's different than when somebody on staff or somebody inside the government has the day-to-day responsibility of being, I don't know, it's different. The parking strategy that we did actually ended up getting mostly implemented, and that was done by staff, and that was the result of a period of time.
There were consultants on the parking study.
The parking strategy. The parking strategy that was related
They came out
to
of
litigation.
parking studies, though.
Well, but the strategy was staff-led. It was done by Chris Engel, and so it was different.
There was
Not
different
but I mean the strategy that was a council directive that, you know, two years ago. So you can make different counter-arguments, but in this case, I'm concerned that it would end up creating a product that would not ultimately be implemented due to a whole lot of different reasons, in part because of how difficult the area is, and I would like to think about putting the resources into expanding the full-time staff that we have, or the constant resources that we have that are to get dedicated inside the government. I could talk about the efficiency study and lots of other studies that we get by outside consultants, and that would be my concern here, is that as well-intentioned as it is, it doesn't end up ultimately being effective to the goal, despite all the good intentions of everybody involved.
And my fear is that if we don't really invest in this, that it's just not going to happen. And it really has to be part of our comprehensive look at this whole city, and it does affect our comprehensive plan. It's integrally involved in how our land use looks. So I just think, and I realize I'm not trying to like downplay how much money this is, but if we're looking to invest millions and millions of dollars in some of these initiatives, I'd like to have a plan by which to make decisions off of. And I just don't right now see that we have a real comprehensive strategy. We have a lot of pieces that have kind of come together. We haven't really put them all and weave them in a way that we can actually say, yes, this is what we're going to be basing our decisions on. And also just recognizing, is it something that our community will even allow us to implement? So I just feel like if we don't invest in this now, it will not happen.
So you don't believe that it is possible for staff to get this done?
I just don't know that for what the proposed timeline is and the interface with the comp plan and everything else. I'm certainly not averse to looking at consultants for the work. My question is, to what end if we don't engage the community about the density question? And so my question to council is, how will you, make that integral to whatever your process is? Because I think we need to have more affordable housing, but it is bumping up against strongly, I think, what the community value is on density that you hear regularly every time you consider density. And so you can't fix one without the other.
And if I may offer, Mayor Walker, and it's related to the staff capacity. And the 2013 comp plan called for changing our zoning. I believe I put forward 2 resolutions to have our staff work on changing our zoning. It doesn't happen. Staff is doing so much of the day-to-day that it's very difficult to step back and look at things from a bird's eye view and comprehensively. And that's why that never gets done. So I think with enough, definition and with enough oversight and close cooperation between staff and consultant, you will get a very good product that then is actionable.
So why wouldn't we consider hiring a staff member?
I would think we need to wait for the city manager to be put in place. That's what I thought we were trying to do, is get a permanent city manager. Because we might be making many different staff changes.
I was just going to say, what you're describing in part there, that when the resolution passes but it doesn't get implemented, that was a city manager problem. I mean, that happened in a lot of different ways. But the responsibility to find out the resources at NDS or wherever else to implement resolutions duly passed by council, that's not necessarily going to be solved by paying a lot of money to an outside consultant.
But we're not going to
produce a better
solve it
plan.
either without having someone, I think we heard actually earlier this evening, that the idea of having a 100-day review of what our government needs from a new person at the helm is actually a very productive way to look at this. And right now, we're always patching holes and throwing this and that. And I think right now we've gotten our advisory group in conjunction with FAR and legal aid, saying that they felt an outside consultant was the way we needed to do this. I'm feeling a sense of urgency, we all are.
Yeah, I would echo Ms. Galvin's statements in regards to not only the sense of urgency, but if, as Mr. Sunshine has alluded to, that if different entities can apply to be the consultant or apply for a portion of it, I think that satisfies kind of that request. It's up to us to make sure that we get the word out to bring in the best.
Has the consultant not been hired for this?
Has a
The,
consultant?
No.
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 That's
We haven't
this
approved
is
the budget.
The request is for the money to be able to issue the RFP.
To issue the RFP, yeah. So I think it would probably be best for us to, actually we belabored the point a good bit. It's after midnight.
Okay.
I would like to
Is there
call
a
the
motion?
question if possible.
If-
Mayor Walker, if you don't
The only
mind.
thing I'd just like to add, if somewhere for the record, that I would like to stress coordination with the zoning code audit, stress comprehensive nature of this strategy. Make sure we do a literature search.
getting that core.
Everything that's been done since Wallace and Robertson Todd study to all, you mentioned Austin, Arlington.
I think they would.
And then looking at the management of this contract, given the multi-cross-departmental nature of this, and how will the city manager's office be brought in? I think I would like those.
And I'll just add to Mr. Murphy's point, how we make, the density question woven into this strategy, because if we develop the strategy that the whole community is an uproar against, then we haven't accomplished anything. I think it's a really important piece.
Right.
Can I just ask one other, where does the $120,000 as an envisioned range come from for the consultant?
Do you want to answer that?
I can answer that. So we had a draft scope of work months ago. I shared that with Ebony Walden, and she provided a quote based on that with a few changes. She made some recommendations. Her quote came back at $93,000, I believe. Since then, we've sort of expanded the work that we are asking a consultant to possibly do. So that's why I raised the amount.
So, but what is that still for? What was the 93,000? How much time? What's the scope? How many hours? It seems like a lot of money.
Correct, and it may not be that much. I just made sure that we had a pot there. It doesn't all have to be used. But that would be, right, I believe the timeline was about 6 months. That would cover the community engagement, developing materials, education materials, coordinating all of the engagement and
would this be
outreach
for
meetings.
one person, one consultant, or multiple consultants working for the
It could
firm?
be either one. So originally it was envisioned as one consultant, but after the work session, what it can do is the RFP can go out, and how we can set it up is you can submit a response for the entire scope of work or portions of that.
Okay. It seems like a lot of money for one person for part-time for 6 months. If all the materials are, it just seems,
There's a lot
I don't
of
know about the
research to
hourly.
this.
No, that would be more full-time for 6 months. There's a whole lot of work going on there. So the scope of work is pretty massive. So it would be a full-time consultant for.
I see. So it's okay, well, that's different than, I didn't, but that's
As a point of reference, the work that was done in Austin, it was actually staff, it wasn't a consultant, but it was 2 dedicated staff for a year, which was far more than $120,000 equivalent to come up with a plan and go through that engagement process. This is a point of reference.
Okay.
All right, so.
It's helpful.
Who seconded it?
We haven't even made the motion yet, I don't think.
I'd like to make a motion that we.
And can I respectfully request that the
Trying to
motion-
get you there, bro. I'm trying to get you there.
Well, I want to make a point because what the papers in front of you don't include the proposal of the 6 meetings over the next year, and I want to make sure that gets included in the motion as long as you agree that that's valuable.
I think we agree that it's valuable.
And I would also like to clarify that the additions that myself and Vice Mayor Hill made, will they be woven into this agreement? So I would say, as amended, that this resolution as amended this evening by these additions, correct?
Yeah, because the motion itself is more generally speaking, and then it's just all the backup in the proposal, which is very specific. So this is just moving to allocation of Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund for completion of a comprehensive housing strategy in the amount of $200,019.
So moved.
Well,
With the proper amendments.
And to Ms. Calvin's point, as amended by the council this
As
evening.
amended by the council.
because we had
Excuse me.
several comments that I know Ms. Pythia took notes on.
Dr. Pathia got them.
All right.
All right.
Was there
Need
a second?
Second.
Here we
Okay.
go.
And then vote. All right, it's 3-2.
He passes. Ha ha ha.
All right. All right, so now we have other business, and I have two. Mr. Murphy, did you get based on the last conversation, are you all not open at this time to having the interim city manager look at the engineer for the NDS position that was recommended in the efficiency study?
I personally don't think we should be moving, I mean, this is very late at night, I'm just not even thinking which particular engineer. Is this something that is replacing an engineer we've already had?
Were you able to get that?
I think that, NDS probably benefits from either an engineer or a planner. I'd like to evaluate what Mr. Ikefano needs most, quite honestly. And I do think that it is a more immediate need. It is in the budget, and it's very different than
If I may.
the question structurally about additional people in the city manager's office. I don't have a recommendation about that for tonight. I wasn't aware it was coming up.
So Mayor Walker,
Didn't I
I
send you
would,
an email?
No.
I would ask that we have that allow Mr. Murphy to look into this, what this need is articulated, and that I could see, certainly if it's a crisis, it's immediate, but I certainly don't want to be implementing whole hog the efficiency study review. We're having a discussion about that coming up soon at a work session. And I'm just, it's 12:15, and we haven't seen any written materials in front of us. And so it's.
I
and
thought
usually
I'd
those-
asked, but maybe I did not, so. Okay.
New NDS position.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that.
There's an email from Alex to us, but.
When did that come
doesn't-
in?
It says, May 27th, no, May 27th, sorry.
Oh, wow.
About civil engineer.
Okay,
but-
so you will just
Because
discuss it.
we discussed it at the work session the
Mhm.
day after Memorial Day, or, that's
A
the
lot has
last-
happened since then.
That's the last time we discussed it, so it was
I
not
would-
on
yeah,
my
we need a
viewfinder for
refresher.
tonight. I apologize.
Okay, all right. And then the next thing was the ABRT review. There were some concerns brought up about what exactly our scope was of the group, and whether we were process only or process, and presenting council with priorities. Everything that's created within the group would come back to council, but the conversation from that we had at the last meeting with CACI, I just wanted for us to revisit it here to make sure that we are on the same page about what we're doing in terms of the overall for the ABRT.
So as I recall, it was in July we had this discussion, and there was a resolution on our consent agenda, and that was pulled, and we had a discussion, Mayor Walker. And in that resolution, or in that staff memo, there was a scope, and there was also an advisory committee. And I thought that was coming from staff, and that advisory group was appointed by the city manager. That's how I was interpreting that, because it wasn't presented to us it was just said it was a steering committee or advisory committee. So my
Yes.
understanding is that if council is appointing a committee, we need to do it as a body, and that then they are subject to open meeting laws. If the city manager appointed them, they don't have to follow the same open meeting laws, and then we don't have to be involved at all. We just can be informed.
Well, we went over the group. I'm sure that I said names and that Heather and I were both participating. So it was.
So I didn't know who appointed those people,
Mhm.
that's all.
Yeah, no, they were people that I asked if they would be willing to
So I guess that's the question.
participate.
Did that needed to be formally adopted by us?
And I will say the same thing I shared with the group the other day when these concerns, of all the rooms that I am in, since I've been here and then before, it is the most diverse group of people of any advisory board that we have. So I do want to point that out.
Was this advisory board, I mean, I'm recalling, but I thought it was this informal, this is doing official council business, but it's not been appointed by council, is that what?
What I
We're
thought
talking
we
about it
were
as an advisory
doing
board,
was
is it?
being charged with the task of presenting to council what could be possible with the ABRT. So there are two counselors on there, Heather and I. There are, how many other?
A few staff, so
Khaki and Ryan.
Ryan Davidson, and then Matthew from our council office.
Are its proceedings foyable? Are these official meetings of a government body that are, I mean, if
It's
staff
a-
are going and you've got two counselors?
And then the
that's
rest are
doing
community members.
Real business?
Right. Well, in terms of FOIA, if it's not been a formal city commission appointed by the council, then you would have two council members present. And this is a group that has not been appointed officially by the public body, so that would not count as a meeting of a public body. Now, saying that, there are issues with ultimately who is appointing these folks. Is it an informal group of two counselors meeting with a group of citizens and talking about the budget review team, or is somebody officially appointing these folks to this team? If somebody, whether it's the mayor, vice mayor, or two counselors are officially appointing a group to discuss public business, then it could be foible.
And then, I guess the question is, if it's officially, if it's an appointment that's being done officially, who does that? Is it the whole council?
Well, right, there are two ways that can be accomplished. The council, via both the city code and the state code, you appoint boards and commissions. Now, the mayor can appoint her own advisory board on a particular issue if she wishes, but if she is doing the official appointing of the group, that could still be a group subject to FOIA. But either avenue can work in terms of informing you all as to the budget review team.
Okay.
Well, we had a mayor's advisory council on innovation and technology when I was mayor, but there was always a disclaimer that said, and you came to some meetings, but it was a discussion group, always a disclaimer that said this does not represent official council business, and I crafted it with Maurice and tried to really figure out how to, because it just, I mean, you can see and it's really, really late. I didn't know this was coming up, so I don't really know what the question is right now for us.
So it's what do you all, we have been meeting, we want to continue. Staff wants to break down, well, do you want to present, Mike, what staff recommendation is?
I'm not part of the group, so I will do my best with that. And I will say that I believe I ended up sitting in for Mr. Jones at the meeting where this was discussed. And we talked about who were the people on the group. And so I thought that the question the mayor was framing at the beginning of bringing this to other business was, is the group only supposed to look at process versus prioritization? Because I would say that it was my impression that by stating what their intended charge was and who was on it, and actually I remember making some comments about, hey, we do this process with the county, right? And it's been very public, whether the county wanted to participate or not. And we need agency voices at the table, additional agency voices at the table that we were, that the council understood what the work was and was endorsing that it could go forward. I would say that from the staff perspective, that did not necessarily include any decisions about where you're prioritizing the spending, right? That's definitely a back to the council for a new discussion and endorsement. So I did think that we'd have to review the table. I thought the council understood and was blessing that the mayor and vice mayor had this group about process, but not about the spending or the priorities themselves. In fact, it was explicitly talked about that would be coming back, and that we were holding all funding level over the 20 season, in recognition of that.
So I guess the question where we could keep it simple for tonight is, are you all in favor of us continuing working on a process to present to council?
I'm fine with it.
I think now that I've gotten the clarification from Mr. Blair, this is essentially a mayor's appointed group, but it will be foible, and that it's on process. I'm comfortable with that, and that the distinction between process and prioritization, I know.
And I was
can get
confused
kinda
there.
slippery.
That's why
So we need to really
it.
make sure that that's clear, and working with staff on that. And
Yes.
And whenever there's a, question, who to talk to.
I also, I'd rather deal with it in the future when we're not, I'm really, really tired. I got up at 6 this morning. But at least as long as there's a disclaimer at every meeting and on written materials that says this is not an initiative of council, just to draw those lines really, really clearly. This is a mayor, because we don't know who's on it. We don't know what the agendas are. We don't know, are you all getting into substantive areas? You're talking about one particular nonprofit. Is somebody, that would not be,
right.
I would feel very uncomfortable if that were the case.
But we did talk about this.
But it wasn't an official.
Yeah, but we didn't see.
Sometimes it's
Okay,
easy to
that's
slip
fine.
things through, and it wasn't. If it was
Well,
not
yeah,
really,
and
we
Mayor
didn't
Watt,
vote on it. We didn't vote on a resolution. We didn't. I don't know anything about who's coming to the meetings.
Maybe you should watch the meeting again, and you can.
Did we vote on a resolution?
But I wasn't sure, was membership raised that day? I don't remember
But
that
did we
part.
vote on a resolution under our rules?
There were no resolution. There was
I
no
don't think so.
resolution,
So-
but there,
so-
no, there was a resolution in the consent agenda that we adopted, that we were reviewing the ABRT. And and Mayor Walker did say a few names of people that were in the group. And my confusion was, I didn't know, was that supposed to be a council appointed? Was that mayor appointed?
Yeah,
Was
same.
there city manager appointed? And now we've gotten that clarified, and that it is a above board process. But I do think we do need to make sure that there aren't, the group is not, passing judgment on who's getting funding and who's not included in the, but we need guidelines, we need criteria that the group, I would think, that provide for us. That's what process means. It's not application of a
So
process.
I think what'll happen, this group was set to go until June. We will have to stop before that point, probably around February. March, the council will then have to appoint a board and have them make recommendations by the deadline for the.
That sounds right.
So that's
That
the
sounds
next
right.
steps. Okay.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you for bringing it forward, even though it's late.
Okay. All right, any other
I
business?
have a real quick, easy one, and I know that Mr. Blair will have a more broader conversation, but because this was specific to the 2nd Street and 3rd Street 13th Street memorandum, I just want all three of us to say it's okay for us to give it to the public. And I also, later on, when it's not 12:15 or 12:30, I think it's important for us, I know we have a new city attorney and we're kind of following different protocols, but in my experience so far, and my expectation is that when we are asked, even if it's council and all of us are asked and staff is responding, that I don't want council to be like the gatekeeper to that information. I want to be aware when it's available. So in this case, I wanted to see the memorandum, but I didn't want to have to do the rallying to get all of us to be okay with it going to public, because it's a perspective from the city on these properties.
If it had been coming from me or one of the departments, I would totally agree with you, and I would have just responded to all the people who've contacted us on this issue. I think that Mr. Blair and I agree. This is legal advice to you all, and that's why it's kind of your attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
You have to decide whether to release the information or not.
I feel, given the questions that are being asked and the nature of these two scenarios, that we need to provide some response, a legal response to the community on both of these. Does anyone have any opposition to that?
I'm not in position.
What's the fallout? I mean,
no fallout. It's just more the idea again that this was some legal advice asked for by the council concerning these issues. So before making,
and this is just letting us be okay to disseminate it.
Right.
All right. It's good to be open.
I think it's going to clarify a lot of things for people.
Right.
A lot of
Okay.
questions keep getting asked.
Okay.
Great. And then the last piece is just because it's
Can I just formally understand what the pulse was? I heard Mr. Signer say that he wasn't going to weigh in, and I just want to make sure that we affirmatively have at least 3 voices.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other business?
This last tiny thing is just because we had an agreement, a ladies and gentlemen's agreement earlier, that if we're after midnight, that we wouldn't go back into closed session. So do we want to commit to that Wednesday time to finish the closed session stuff that we didn't get through? Just asking.
Yes.
Because we're not clerk to do it. Yes.
Okay, so it's from 2 to 3? Do you want to plan on that?
That sounds.
Or 2:15 to 3:15? I think
Yes.
you and I are coming back from something with Jaunt, Kathy.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll have to get back here. So
Yeah.
2:15, and then Brian will send out that notification.
Okay. All right, any
Okay.
other business? All right, matters by the public, anyone here? You don't have anything, Brandon? You're.
Hampton, during the HEAL panel discussion.
Real quick, it's my first time.
Come on.
Someone said you were coming
Really,
later. I meant later in the week.
Sean.
I agreed to this at 2 o'clock, thinking this was going to be a very short agenda.
Can we read it?
You know.
We can read it.
We can read it.
I have written comments which I've handed out here, and I'm just going to summarize it in hopefully less than a minute and a half or so.
Are you gonna pass them to us?
Oh, I'll pass it out in a second, but this is going to be a little bit different here. There's a 7 up there for, oh gosh. Sean Tubbs, city resident, 1029 Forest Hills Avenue, employee of the Piedmont Environmental Council. I'm here just to remind you guys, just wanted to set up this Thursday's meeting, actually in 2 days, with the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. You can read through what we've written here, and I just basically want to say you've had a chance to talk with the county, Albemarle County, your partners hopefully, in solving a lot of the problems you've discussed tonight, especially about density. Talked about density tonight. A lot of people unhappy about the density that might be coming with some of the, there were comments earlier from many people about some of the density. Some of those solutions might be in Albemarle County. But I do want to key in here to the main thing I think that these memorandums of understanding that were agreed to a couple of years ago could really help with, which is transportation. We've seen the regional transit partnership start, which I've been to a couple of those meetings, very much want to keep attending to those. I would welcome my colleagues in the press to pay some attention to those meetings, really start talking to people about how transit works in this community and how it actually works. These solutions that we face are not easy, and they're going to take some tough things. But I do want to dial back to also to trails and to sidewalks. And of course, we at PEC are working with the Planning District Commission on this regional pedestrian and bicycle plan for the combined urban core. That'll be coming up later on this year. Very much hope that can help with some of the issues going on in terms of connectivity. But again, I would just say, I'm going off script here, you've got what we wrote, but I would say just from the perspective of somebody who's been to many of those meetings, and could never actually say this out loud before, but it's been somewhat concerned that nothing ever happens at those meetings. I just urge you when you go to these meetings, not just this one, but also the PAC meetings, the MPO meetings, the Regional Transit Partnership meetings, talk about the details and talk about how we can try to figure out ways to move some of these things forward at the regional issues, because staff doesn't always talk to each other, or if they do talk to each other, things get left out and the bigger picture is sometimes left behind. Well, that's your job. As elected officials, your job is to look at the bigger picture. And it's very late, and I'll just leave you with that. And
Thank you for that reminder.
this is fun to talk like this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good night, y'all.
All right, meeting adjourned.
All right. Thanks.